I don't think that we understand the depth of how violent this was. It was like the Grim Reaper. After killing 4 people, the first thing I thought is that this was motivated. We were probably dealing with some kind of disaffected, angry boyfriend. Obviously, this individual knew where Maddie hung her hat. She's been killed. Ethan's been killed. Now he's going to try to get out. As he is walking down the hall, he looks right at Dylan. That's when she sees this, the bushy eyebrows. And that was a damning bit of information. The question is, why didn't he kill Dylan? Well, this food delivery driver who had dropped Xana's food at approximately 4 a.m., she said in a later statement that she looked over and she saw Kohberger out there. She's lucky, I think, to actually have survived as well. We're talking about a grown man that is a junkie, that studied criminology. You know, retrospectively, you look back at this, and this is really, really dark stuff.
Hey guys, if you're not subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, no problem, but I'd really appreciate it if you would save it to your watch later playlist. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below. Thank you. One of my favorite podcast guests of all time in the building today on short notice. We got this flight like 36 hours ago. Joseph Scott Morgan, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, Bubba. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. It is always very special for me to see the people who were there like along the way. The first time you were with me was episode 146 in my parents' house.
Yep.
That was like April. I think we recorded that April 2023. So I was still there. And then you came back and did what ended up being 2 podcasts, 170 and 171. One of the first recordings we did in here that, for my money, is the best homicide breakdown, like the facts around that aspect of it, of the JFK case that I have ever heard in my life. I don't know that I will ever be able to top that in a podcast in here. Man. So highly recommend people to go back in the library.
Praise. Thank you.
And check
Thank
that
you so
out.
Much. I enjoy doing it.
It is great to talk with you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You're the man, and you are also the man on literally every channel talking about every case that comes up, no matter what it may be. So for people that did not see episode 146 and somehow have not seen you on every channel or all over social media, what is your background?
My background is I started out, I'm a native New Orleanian. And I claim New Orleans as my hometown. And I started down there with the coroner's office when I was very young, far too young to be doing the job that I was doing, but got thrown into it. And back during the wild, woolly 80s, when crack was first hitting the street. And so I got baptized pretty quickly. And
by crack?
As luck would have it, I guess. Well, luck for me, not so much luck for
Get a spoon out. Get a lighter.
No, you had to learn really quickly back then, and I worked on a staff of. There were only 3 investigators for my jurisdiction, period, and so the 2 guys that I worked with at the time were both. They had an affinity, as my grandpa used to say, for pulling the cork. So I was a young guy, and they were like, hey, can you cover for me? And I wound up covering for them all the time. And there's an old adage in medicine that says, see one, do one, teach one. And I really wound up doing that. And then plus I was working at the morgue at the same time as a diener, which is an old German term for servant of the dead, which means that I was participating in the dissection of the bodies as well. So I would spend time in the morgue learning about forensic pathology, working with some really good forensic pathologists that were willing to tolerate me and ask my questions. And then I was working as an investigator at night. And then after I was there for just over half a decade, I got offered the position of senior investigator with the medical examiner in Atlanta. And went on to be there for, 14, 15 years and came through really dark time in my life relative to, had seen far too many dead bodies because that's all we do in my field, medical legal death investigation. And my therapy turned out to be going into academia. And I've now been, believe it or not, I've been in academia now for 21 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. So I've had quite the long career, but I started very, very young, and and here I sit now. I get to come to Hoboken, so there you go, and I love it. Love seeing my man up here, and so proud of everything you've done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's and the feeling is mutual. But you also wrote what's considered like the preeminent book that a death investigator ever wrote, Blood Beneath My Feet, award-winning book back in 2013, something like that.
Yeah, it was 12. I wound up winning an award called Georgia Author of the Year, and the reason that was special to me is because looking back, it was kind of validation, because I had a lot of people that were in true crime back then, as true crime as it was back then. It's not the same as it is now. They would say, I don't want to hear about his depression. I wrote the book from the perspective of death as my companion, because every case that I went on was unique, and I talked about the struggles I was dealing with. Everybody wants to hear about the gore, and that's what I always say, that people want to rub up against it just enough so that the smell doesn't get on them. And I lived with the smell, and I lived in that environment, and I put it down in words. And it's actually, that award is the first award that Pat Conroy won. Who wrote Prince of Tides and Lords of Discipline, which is one of my favorite books, and The Great Santini. And he was a Southern author, and it used to be called, of all things, I guess I'll get canceled for saying this, the Dixie Writers Award is what it was originally called. But I won that award.
They got with the times.
Yeah. So there you go. But yeah, I won it Georgia Author of the Year. And it's interesting you should say that, because when that happened, that's when the media came calling.
Yes.
And it was this weird set of circumstances, and it happened to be the Jodi Arias case.
Crazy.
They saw that I'd won an award. Somebody at CNN said, "Hey, we need a medical examiner." I'm not a medical examiner. I'm a medical legal death investigator. I'm the eyes and the ears.
Right.
Well, would you be willing to come on? And that started this journey that I've been on now with the media since, 2013, I guess. And I never say no.
Yeah, you're good at that. You could, like I said, that we turn this around very quickly.
Yeah.
You're that dude. But for people that just to understand, I guess the order of business here, so they can picture exactly what you did. You have the coroner on one hand, who's a doctor,
right,
who examines the body. You mentioned, and you've talked about in previous episodes, where you would go train with them and be a part of that, but you're not the coroner. And then you're the death investigator on the scene. So you are basically like that level. The detectives who run the case are the detectives who are actually putting together all the evidence.
Yeah.
You're the guy who's collecting. You're focused on specifically the evidence at the scene and what happened there to tell the story, so the detectives can do their job.
Right. And I'm focused on the body. Detectives come and go, and you'll see them. They'll rotate through. Medical legal death investigators pretty much stay. We're there. We inhabit that world. So we'll get some young detective that will come through, and maybe they were a robbery detective or burglary or literally pawn shop detectives, which is a thing. I've seen them all, and then they think they want to be homicide detectives. They'll come in, and it generally takes, to really be a good homicide detective, it's going to take you about 3 years to get trained up to the point. So by the time they get trained up to that point, they want to go sit for the sergeant's exam. Well, if you do that, you're going back in uniform. So it's hard many times to retain detectives, but we're, as medical legal investigators, we're in that space all the time. We inhabit it. And then we'll have detectives that will come up and say, the young one's like, "Oh, I remember this now." It's like, so what do we do now?
Yeah.
It's like, but my focus is the body. I'm the eyes and the ears of the forensic pathologist on the scene, because contrary to what you see on television, forensic pathologists who are highly trained physicians don't come out to scenes unless it's something that is so vast relative to numbers. Many times that dictates it. If you have a mass casualty event, sometimes they'll come out for those. Some complex homicides, but most of the time you're not going to see them. So everything that you're doing, and this is the most important part, is it is completely independent of what the police are doing. We don't work for the police. We conduct a separate investigation, and we're applying science at the scene. I got to tell you, everybody goes on and on about seeking justice and all these things. That's really easy to say. I'm not interested in justice.
You're not?
No, that's down the hall and to the left. That's not my department. My department is the science surrounding the bodies. Now, anybody can take the data that we generate and apply it however they wish. It's objective scientific data.
And then you testify to that in many cases.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you just try to, and I get along with defense attorneys as well as I do prosecutors. You have to in our world. We're not there, I'm not there to, it's like if somebody in my field ran out into the median in some highway and snatched the radar gun out of a state trooper's hand. Well, that ain't my job. I'm going to wind up in bracelets too for doing that. But in the same breath, they don't do what I do.
Yes.
And it's a life lived with the dead.
One of the things that I do not like to have to think about is my food throughout the week. You've heard me talk about that before on the podcast, but I'm constantly doing things to try to make this show go. And the idea of having to cook meals every single night and think about something different or making things from scratch, no good for me, especially in the summer. Like, I'm trying to go outside and enjoy it like everyone else, even work out there sometimes. So anything that's stopping me from doing that is a drag. And that's where HelloFresh comes in. With HelloFresh, you can make your summer both enjoyable and delicious by getting the #1 meal kit as voted by USA Today's readers. HelloFresh makes it easier to fit quick, home-cooked meals into your schedule every week by curating delicious recipes right to your door, like panko-crusted chimichurri barramundi or sun-dried tomato grilled cheese sandos, as well as over 100 seasonal snacks, sides, and treats. Also, this summer, HelloFresh has made it even easier to enjoy delicious, healthy, and homemade quality meals with their new ready-made meals. These heat-and-go HelloFresh meals are chef-crafted, flavorful dishes ready in just 3 minutes, so you can dig in and go do summer right. So make your summer enjoyable and delicious by signing up for HelloFresh at hellofresh.com/Julian10FM. That link is in the description below, and get 10 free meals with a free item for life. That's hellofresh.com/Julian10FM. Once again, link in description below for 10 free meals and a free item in every box. Once again, hellofresh.com/Julian10FM. You're going to get 1 per box with an active subscription. Free meals are applied as a discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. We got you in here right now. Obviously, there's always cases going on, so it's always going to be a good time to bring you in. But part of the reason we turned this around quickly is because we are coming up on the Kohberger sentencing. So this episode, I think I'm going to put this out like a day before. Yeah. Because that's happening next week.
23rd.
That's sentencing and everything. So obviously, most people out there are going to be familiar with the Idaho 4 and this college murder that happened that now Brian Kohberger has admitted to and pled guilty in exchange for a deal. We'll go through all that and we'll go through the case. But I do want to play something that I played the last time you were here when we did episode 170 and 171, because I think people should see this just to show how you handle these things. Ethan Chapin's mom showed up at, I think it was CrimeCon,
Orlando.
In Orlando in late 2023. You did not know this, obviously, but you were up on stage in front of thousands of people giving a presentation on various cases that included, at the time, the Idaho 4, because that was a year after the murders. And I want people to see this because, we were talking a few minutes ago about all the different people that sometimes forget what's on the other side of these cases, which is a real world thing, and the gravity that needs to be taken with that. And I feel like you did a pretty amazing job here just letting this happen. Go ahead, Joe. Oh, is it a little ad right before? Sorry, this isn't on YouTube. This is on an article link right here. So we got about 20 seconds. But there were 4 just... While we have a minute here, there were 4 total victims.
4 victims.
Ethan was one of them.
Yes.
The Gonzalez girl was another one. Morgan Mogan, and then
Maddie Mogan. Yeah.
Maddie Mogan, and then Xana
Kernodle. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So we'll go through that whole thing, but we got it now. Go ahead.
And I'm Ethan's mom.
So she did a Q&A. She walked up to the...
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is at the end of my talk, actually. I had no idea this was coming.
And I actually didn't sit through it because it's too hard to watch, but I do want all of you to know that these were 4 of the greatest kids, and that all of the great things that you read about them is legitimately true. And I can speak on behalf of my own son, who was an incredible human. And we miss him all terribly. But it's a very strange situation to be. I'm not a true crime follower, but I am now thrust into the epicenter of something that has become pretty incredible. But anyways, don't forget these kids. I appreciate, I did watch the beginning where you spoke a little bit on behalf of all 4 kids, and they're amazing. They were amazing, amazing kids in the prime of their life. So that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you could see it. I'm sure people can see it on the camera there. You were pretty shocked when she walked up, but really gave her a chance to say what she needed to say, which is also like the part people can't forget here. So many times we make these cases about the vicious killer because we're so fascinated by how evil they are and whatever, but it's not even like you're keeping score or something. I don't want to say it like that, but people get lost in the facts of the grisliness of the case, that they don't take the temperature of the gravity of the situation. And in this case, kids that were cut down when they were 20 years old, which is just horrific on every level.
Yeah, it is. And you can't take the measure of it most of the time. And that's, and that's a thread that runs through all of these cases, not just the Idaho 4, but what people don't see, particularly as it applies to practitioners, is the fact that once you're done at the scene, processing the scene and collecting all of the evidence and having the remains removed and getting ready to be autopsied, the next step in your job is to deal with families. And I spent, I'd say, just as much time dealing with families as I did dealing with the dead. And what, you look at this poor woman, what kind of explanation, what kind of comfort are you actually going to offer her? There's nothing. There's not enough money in the world. There's not enough, vacuous promises that you can make her that everything's going to be better. And here's something else that I want to dispel right now. Whoever came up, whatever, I don't know, wizard came up with the idea of closure is full of shit. Because closure, it's one of the biggest lies that has ever been propagated, I think, in the mental health community. Because closure never happens. You think about these four kids. The families are left behind. Where's the closure? Explain that to me. Can you tell me where are they actually going to get closure? Because there will always be an empty chair, forever and ever. Amen. There's nothing you can do to assuage their grief. Nothing. And again, I'll use this term multiple times. It goes to intellectual laziness, I think. Intellectual laziness. Yeah, and also dismissiveness when you use the term closure. Yeah. Because if you say, well, hopefully this is going to offer you some measure of closure, or hopefully someday you'll have closure. Okay, next, who's next? That way you've kind of shuffled them off. Yes. And it never goes away. In my work, when I was working as a death investigator, I still had parents. I had one guy that for 7 years he called me, generally once a month, and he was drunk. And he made a connection with me. Right. His son had hung himself, and and I've probably related the story previously, but it's
146. I remember this.
Yeah, it pissed me off at first, but it's just part of it. They just want somebody to talk to.
Yes.
And that's why I hate that term closure. Absolutely hate it. And, I can't speak for her. Maybe she will. I hope she does. I hope that, but to me, it always seems this fantastical kind of pie in the sky thing.
It is.
Because we're trying to escape death and what happens to us with death. It's just not that simple. It's never that simple.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
It's also, like you said, such a terminology, academic kind of word.
It
like
is.
Closure. There's no emotion to that word. Do you think, though, that obviously this doesn't happen for everyone, especially when they lose someone so close to them in such a horrific way, but do you think it's possible for people like Ethan's mother to eventually get some level of peace?
Maybe, yeah. And it's never, I don't think that for any of these people that go through this, they never have like a static day.
Right.
Where, they've achieved this higher level of peace, if you want to put it in Eastern terms. I don't think that happens. I think that it rises and falls with the tide. There'll be certain things that will, have that moment in time where it triggers their brain, whether it's seeing a toy in the house that child once played with, or maybe they're looking over old photographs or whatever. It could just be a change in the weather. Gee, my son used to like to sit out in the sun after a cold, blustery day. Even if it was still cold outside, he would just welcome that opportunity. Well, it's those little things that no one can anticipate, and it drags all that stuff back up in their mind. So, there's never really any end to it, in my estimation, at least, based upon my observations as a practitioner. I've never seen anybody actually achieve closure, certainly. Maybe some level of peace, but there's always that storm that's brewing right beneath the surface.
Yeah. It's just, one of the things that sticks out to me, I have these moments in here with different guests that some of them will just stay in your head for a long time. But when you told the story in episode 146 about, not even the story, just these stories of notifying people.
Yeah.
You call it notifications. You just alluded to it a few minutes ago, where you have to tell people what's going to be the worst day of their life, the worst possible news you could ever tell them.
Yeah.
And you have to do it in a professional way. And that their life is never going to be the same, but they're going to get all these people to come around them afterwards who are going to try to sell them this idea of closure.
Right.
And, it's not your job to tell them to ignore those people, because what the fuck do you say to someone that their earth has been shattered?
Yeah. And, again, I used to, early on in my career, I made the mistake of saying early on, well, they didn't suffer, which makes me a liar. Out and out, because I know good and well that people suffered. But you can't bring yourself to tell somebody that, and you don't want to be over the top and ghoulish about it. And so, just from my own, I guess, personal, I don't know, who I am as a person, I got to the point where when that question was asked, and it would inevitably be asked, did they suffer? I'd say, I don't know. I don't know that they did. And then they'll try to get you to give them another measurement, relative to it. Did it take a long time for them to die? I don't know. I really don't. And that's something that as humans, we have to come to terms with individually. There is no one out there that can actually offer that information up to you and say specifically and truthfully that that's the amount of time that it took for somebody to die, or that their pain centers were not firing after this point in time. There's no way to calculate that. Okay. The best thing you can do is many times just simply say, I don't know. I just don't know. Instead of offering them these platitudes again, it goes back to closure. It's the same thing. Well, they're in a better place, or they're at peace now, or they didn't suffer. Well, it's intellectually dishonest, because you don't know, just putting that information out there, what kind of ripple effect it's going to have in that individual's life moving forward and how they view death. Now, you don't look at those sorts of things at that moment in time, but think about it just for a second, because if there's ever another death that occurs in their life, based upon this fallacy that you've offered up to them, that's still a continuing untruth there.
The other thing is, though, you get thrown into it, like you said, very young, but also trial by fire. You're in Atlanta, and then later you're in New Orleans. You're in these huge city centers where there's cases all the time.
Yeah.
And not that makes it better. It's just like it's more common for you to be walking in onto a grisly scene or something horrible, because there's just statistically a lot of them. And then you think about a case like what happened in Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah.
On the scene at the university where they found these kids. And that's the one thing that I can't get out of my head. It's like all these police officers, all these initial first responders on the job, this is what they signed up for. These are the exact kind of situations they have to go to. But they're from a place where you don't see much of that.
No.
And so now they walk in on 4 kids.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I would like you to take us through the scene and just what it was. But
Right.
You walk in on 4 young kids butchered. I mean, they were absolutely, it was the worst kind of ending that they could have had. And I think about all those people who went and saw that, and how much, just as a human being, that even if that's their job, how much that had to extra fuck them up, because they really weren't accustomed
They'll
to that.
never get past it. And I think that many people out there they'll say, well, you eventually will. That's it's a load of crap. You're not going to get past it. And it's one thing to walk into a crime scene, and let's just take Idaho for example, where you've got sharp force injury that has been sharp force injuries have been generated. It's one thing to walk in and you've got one body, but then it begins very quickly. You're taking a measure of what you're standing there looking at, and all of a sudden it's 4, and there's blood everywhere. I think people labor under this idea that firearms-related deaths are, these big bloody events, and they can be, and I've worked several that are over the course of my career, but nothing ever matches multiple stab wounds. It's or sharp force injury, because not all of the injuries are stab wounds. Some of them are incised wounds, which means slices. Yeah, that's why, like, for instance, our teeth are called incisors. It's an incised thing that cuts. So stab wounds, I'm going to go into teaching mode. Stab wounds are deeper and more narrow. Slices are shallow and longer. So you have an edged weapon that can generate either one of those. And also it can be used as a bludgeon as well. You'll have people that are beaten with knives on the handle.
Yes.
I've worked those as well. But yeah, you'll have all manner of these. So when these police officers would have made initial contact and would have walked into the scene, it would have been, I would imagine, would have been taken, it would have been very hard for them to try to comprehend, because once you come across the first body, which we don't really know yet because not all the info has been released, would have been Ethan and Xana, and they're on the second floor of the structure. And I can go into kind of a detailed description of the structure, because the structure,
let's do that.
The structure is just bananas. So, give this some context. If anyone's ever lived in a college town and you don't want to live on campus, there are all manner of these structures around the periphery of a campus that you can rent. All right,
I did that.
Yeah, and I did as well. And most of the time, I'm not going to say they're derelict in condition, but many times
I will.
Yeah, many times you go into these places and not are they, college kids tend to be, kind of messy. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about the structures themselves, because many times the landlords, property owners, they'll do anything they can to squeeze another couple of people in, because, you're racking up money every month. So this structure, it's actually on King Road, off campus from University of Idaho. Sits originally, it was a 2-story structure, and it's built into a dirt bank. Okay, so you think about having a big dirt bank. It's on the side of a hill, and they kind of carve this thing out and build this house into it. It's a 2-story. You enter on what I refer to, and it's what people have seen in the news, this image of there's a parking pad. It's kind of a gravel drive in the back. There's a rear entrance. That door actually had a keypad on it, okay, like a security keypad. Come to find out that a lot of people had the code for that door, because people come and go. You got people that graduate, they leave, that sort of thing. So there's one occupant downstairs in that ground level or parking pad level entry spot. You go up an internal staircase, and it kind of switches back, goes up, switches back, and you're on the second floor landing. When it opens up into the second floor landing, there are 2 bedrooms up there. You've got this kind of a great room that opens into, the flow of it, where there's a fireplace, kind of a dining area, of course, the kitchen, and then down the hallway, you've got 2 more bedrooms. Xana and her boyfriend, Ethan, were in those rooms that night. There was one other roommate who actually is the person that, identified the guy with the bushy eyebrows, is what they kept talking about. And she was...
Was that Dylan?
Yeah. Dylan was living on that floor. Then, down that hallway, there is another stairwell that goes up and switches back to the top floor, which is 3rd story. The 3rd story is an add-on. That's not something that was there originally. As a matter of fact, a few years back, I was actually on air. This is kind of fascinating. I was on air with a guy that was the former Attorney General for the state of Idaho, and he was also the former Lieutenant Governor. And he was an alum of the University of Idaho. He had actually been to that house when it was a 2-story structure, because one of his fraternity brothers, his son was going to school there, and they had gathered, at homecoming, they all gathered together, and he had been there. And I remember listening to him describe it, that he had been there prior to the 3rd floor being added. So let me go back to the 2nd floor. I'm sorry if I'm all over the board with this, but it's a bit confusing. So the 2nd floor, the one thing I didn't mention is that, how I talked about the house is actually built into this bank. Well, there are, some people call them sliding glass doors. Some people say sliders. There are these sliders that open out, and you look out over this kind of rising field that slopes up away from the house. And there's a brush line up there in the back, kind of forms a horseshoe. And you can actually sit there, and there's a couple of shots the week of, I think, when they've got people out there working the scene, of agents, and they're from an unidentified agency.
Also, we have a great picture right there.
That's it. This is what you're describing. 2nd floor right there, and you can actually see the sliders.
Yep.
So when you're looking down that hill, and you're in the dark, and you're back up the hill, that house looks like a burning flame in a cave. You can see everything that goes on in those windows at night, and no one would know that you're there. It's a point of observation. You can surveil the area very easily. There's actually a parking area up above that. It's a cul-de-sac up there. You can't go anywhere else. But there's a parking area up above. And you could sit there in the brush line or even in a car and peer down through that kind of brushy area and see everything that was down there. And according to what we've heard, Maddie Mogan's bedroom, which is where the two, Maddie and Kaylee, were actually killed on the third floor, you could see everything. Primarily her bedroom in particular, when it was illuminated at night. I mean, it would just pop. And you're in total darkness, so you can observe it. There's a real creepy factor to this. So if you use that hill descending down to the second floor where the sliders are, the sliders were commonly left unlocked. So there's no signs of forced entry at the scene, which obviously is something that we look for regularly. The two things you'll hear us say all the time: no signs of forced entry or struggle.
You know what? Not once did we lock our downtown house at college. I'm just thinking out loud about this. Like,
No.
I'd never thought about that, but it was an old school house, weird setup like this.
Right,
I
right.
actually lived in the attic, which would have been a top floor like that. Another bizarre kind of downtown college house. And we had, like the breezeway door and then the regular door, and that shit was unlocked 24/7.
Can I tell you something else that really set my teeth on edge about this case? As a dad, as a college professor, and then as an investigator, former investigator, the girls did a TikTok, and anybody can pull this up, and it's done on the second floor, and they're imitating one another.
On the second floor.
Yeah. And they're imitating one another relative to their personalities, like, level of, are they a neat freak, or are they very, worried about school? And they're doing, and it's all done in fun. But anybody that wanted to see that, suddenly you have this view into their world that I don't know how else you would have that. And it literally, and it's not real long, but it kind of spins around. You can see each one of these girls kind of doing their interpretation of their friends. And it's very chilling. So anybody that is watching on social media, they can see this. And particularly if somebody has already begun to target one of the individuals, they'd be really interested in seeing this, because now they have the lay of the land. The house was known, allegedly, as and I've really had a hard time, Julian, trying to verify this, because as you admitted, and as I will admit as well, if you live in these off-campus houses, you can say that, well, it was a party house. Well, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that, people are kicking out windows, it's Animal House, people are just acting, just crazy out of their mind all the time? Or does that mean that we're just going to have solo cups and we're sitting out in the backyard drinking beers or mixed drinks or whatever the case might be, or smoking weed or doing whatever we do? I don't know, but they've said that this place is a party house. And so you've got, according to what has been mentioned over a period of time, there were people circulating in and out of this place all the time. Many times they wouldn't know who the people were that were coming and going. I had that experience in college.
I did too.
I think everybody that lives in these own off-campus dwellings does as well. So it's almost like a perfect recipe. You've got these young women that are occupying the space. They are in a position where the house is unsecured. They had no reason. I mean, you even painted the picture just a moment ago. And this is pretty insightful. Moscow, Idaho, they don't have violent crime at all. If someone
they hadn't had a murder in like 8 years or something.
It's been
like
a
that.
very long time, and it actually, here's another interesting aside, something that came out, and I can get into this later if you wish. The food delivery driver.
4 a.m.
Yeah. Well, you know, they identified her and found out who she was.
Who was she?
She was this lady that lived over Pullman, Washington, which is where Washington State is only 10 miles away.
She was from there too?
She's from Washington. Yeah, Washington State. And to say that, look, for those that are watching and listening, depending upon the route you go, it's either 8 or 10 miles away. It's really no big shakes. These things are so close together. This food delivery driver who had dropped Xana's food off to her at approximately 4 a.m., her husband, former husband, was a homicide victim in Moscow back in 2013. He had been shot.
No way.
Yeah, and he's like one of the few, and it's weird how the world kind of connects like that, isn't it? And she had talked about this in an interview. I can go into some of the stuff, but she's had a hell of a time just trying to get her life on track. She's got, she deals with all kinds of medical issues and all kinds of things. And she got hooked up on driving under the influence charges. And that's how we found out who she was, because when they're interviewing her, she says, I'm the food driver. I've got to testify. And they're talking to her about her DUI back at the station house. And I'm going to be testifying in this trial coming up in July. And they were like, what trial are you talking about? The 4 students that were murdered. I'm going to be, and so that's how that came out, courtesy of ABC on the Dateline program. And so that's how we, kind of came to this idea of who she was. But her husband actually had been a homicide victim in Moscow.
That's
and
insane.
What are the odds? What are the odds
That's
that
the universe.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
a real
It's
sick wink
super
of the
bizarre. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. So anyway, back to the structure. The structure itself, here's my thing.
There was a basement too, right?
Yeah, there is a basement, and that's the first floor, the parking level. So some people will refer to that as the basement. Some people will say that is first floor landing, and then they'll say it's a ground floor, and I've heard other people say the second floor is ground floor. And as you can see, they're totally different points of entry here. If they took you or I into a similar structure and turned off the lights, okay, and we had not been in this place, I couldn't find my way around.
It's riot proof.
Yeah, it is just, it switches back on itself. It's these weird turns, and so my contention has been that whoever it was that perpetrated these crimes had to have some level of familiarity with this place and would have to have a certain level of comfort as well, almost an intimate comfort with it. I thought when I first, and I think I did my first media appearance regarding this case the day after. It hasn't stopped since then. When the first thing I thought is that this was sexually motivated, and I thought that we were probably dealing with, some kind of disaffected, angry boyfriend. I knew it was probably going to be male because of just what they were saying about the savagery at this point in time. And that kept bubbling up all the while, and that these are knife injuries. And that whoever went through here, it was like the Grim Reaper. There's copious amounts of blood that are deposited on multiple surfaces. It's a very dynamic environment, and the individual is moving through the house. So I thought that, well, obviously this individual has he knew where Maddie hung her hat, which was on the 3rd floor. I don't think that the perpetrator expected to find Kaylee up there. She was just back visiting. She had already gotten a job.
Wait, she didn't live there?
She had previously. As a matter of fact, her bedroom, her empty bedroom's down the hallway from Maddie's, and her bed's gone. So these two girls knew each other since they were tiny things.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they had grown
Yeah,
up
they
together.
weren't like that.
So they'd gone out that night, the night leading up to the murders, which would occur, at 4 a.m. the next morning, or just after 4 a.m., going toward the 4:30 time period. They had been out that night. They had had drinks. They had eaten. There's the infamous food truck,
Yep.
video that we have of them, and they were essentially sleeping in the same bed, which is not an unusual practice for them. Maddie had come back to show off her, to tout the fact that she had gotten a job. She was excited. She was moving on. She had a brand new vehicle, which was like a Range Rover.
Wait, Kaylee had come back. Right?
I'm sorry, Kaylee. Kaylee. I said Maddie. I apologize. Kaylee has come back, and she is, wanting to be there with her friends and celebrate. I don't think the perpetrator knew that she was there, and so much for observational skills or tracking an individual. I don't think that they necessarily knew that that Xana and Ethan were there.
Yeah, there was something where, if I remember this correctly, details are getting fuzzy, but obviously Kohberger, as we now know, was the person who did it. He went upstairs, he kills Maddie Mogan.
Yep.
And then obviously finds Kaylee there at the same time and kills her.
Yes.
And maybe it was Ethan walked out of the room or something.
It was Xana. Xana actually, according to what we're hearing now, and again, not all the data has been released, but according to what we're hearing now, Xana may have seen him on the staircase and come back to her room. So she proceeded up the staircase. She heard something probably upstairs, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And he came down the staircase, believed that Ethan was still in bed asleep. Remember, Xana had been up and it took the food order. And that was like at, I don't know, that was at 4:04. I can't remember specifically when it was dropped off. But they would have passed one another or would have seen, and that's what the driver said. She said in a later statement, this driver, that she looked over and she saw Kohberger out there. And that was one of the linchpins, I think, to all of this, because it was
saw him outside of his car, not in the white Hyundai Elantra.
Right. Well, saw him in his car. Outside.
Because there's video of him pulling up at 4:05, and she had just dropped off the food. So she like passed the car and she saw him.
She saw him.
Got it.
And that was a damning bit of information that, now I don't know that we'll ever, things not going to trial. So I don't know that we'll ever hear her full story. Hopefully we will. But, that she's lucky, I think, to actually have survived as well. I'm sure, reflectively, thinking back, it would send a chill up even most stalwart person. It's going to send a chill up your spine to think about what you were in proximity to, the hell that was going to follow after that. They believe that Ethan was in bed. Still asleep, perhaps. He stabbed multiple times. Xana has fought back. As a matter of fact, she's grabbed hold of the blade. From what we understand, she has cuts on her hand that go all the way down to the tendons. So, and that's very common in sharp force injuries, where you're trying to fend somebody off. You try to parry their move. You grab hold of the blade, and the blade is actually dragged through the hands. So that's what they believe had occurred. And there's been one disturbing bit here, and I don't know what they actually mean. And this is, and when I say they, I mean the news media has put this out there. They use the term carve relative to Ethan's leg, that his leg was carved. Now, as a guy that works in forensics, you're going to have to be more specific with me than say carve, because carve, for instance, there's an ongoing case in Atlanta I've been covering now for, Lord, I guess 3 years now, a lady that was found in Piedmont Park along with her dog, and she was carved. She had, someone had taken a knife and carved the word fat into her stomach after just stabbing her multiple times and killing her pit bull in the park as well. And that's a carving, okay? So what do these people mean when they say carved? And we don't have a lot of that information. For me, is, you know, living in the world of forensic medical legal death investigation, I was particularly interested in the injuries and kind of the sequencing, if it could ever be sequenced. One of the things that I thought about early on is if they had found the knife, and I remember talking about this early on, Julian. You're making me think about all this stuff now. I thought that if there was any way that they could try to determine the sequencing of who was stabbed or cut first, if you could find any remnant of DNA from the other victims on the victims, the preceding or the following victims.
Yes.
Almost like an inoculation where, you know, because there's not time to wipe a knife off. You're going to proceed through the house. And had any of these individuals, particularly if we think it was Anna and Ethan, that they were stabbed last, was there any blood evidence off of Kaylee or Maddie that had been introduced onto them as well? We don't have that information as well. So I was very curious about that. And that could go to sequencing from just a science standpoint, you know, because you would not find, for instance, on Kaylee and Maddie's body, you would not find Xana and Ethan's DNA or blood deposition on them.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I was thinking about earlier relative to this. But of course, as we all know, the knife was never recovered.
He left the sheath there, though, right?
Yeah, he did. And I so much with the sheath. And I had, and it was found essentially adjacent to Maddie. Okay. Now we have to go back. One of the things that there was evidence of that the police have are these receipts from purchases that had taken place. And Kohberger allegedly had purchased Dickies coveralls. Now, folks have never seen Dickies coveralls. They are what they are. You slip over them, it looks like something somebody in a garage would wear. They zip up right in the center. There's generally a pocket up top over the breast area, and then you've got deep pockets on the side. But you don't have belt loops. And you would, with a base knowledge of forensics, you would think, well, an individual would want this in order to create a barrier between themselves and any kind of DNA. You put gloves on over that. You put a balaclava on, which he allegedly has purchased several that cover, you know, only you can see the eyes, essentially. The bushy eyebrows, now the infamous bushy eyebrows. And someone is proceeding through the house and they're kind of garbed out in all of this. But yet you don't have a way to strap this K-bar USMC combat knife to your body because there are no belt loops. I had in my mind kind of worked out this idea, why would you go to all this trouble and then drop the damn sheath? Why would you do that? Why, well, if you're in some kind of frenzy, for instance, and it's not attached to your person, I have actually visualized this idea of him making entry into this room of maybe this young woman that he had targeted, that he was going to exact something from her that would satisfy him. And very dramatically, he's over her body and he unsheathes this thing and then drops the knife and then he goes to work. And he's frenzied. I submit to you, he's in a heightened sexual frenzy. And he goes to work. And he's in such frenzy that he leaves that damn sheath behind. And it's kind of protected right there. As grotesque as that is, it's kind of protected any kind of evidence that's on there. And that's some of the things that we look for. I mean, can you imagine? I'd love to hear a comment from the detectives about this. Was it like a eureka moment for them when they go to move her body and suddenly there's this epiphany before them where they've got the sheath, but there's no knife. And they're thinking at this moment in time, okay, well, do any of these girls have any kind of combat knife experience? Would she have a K-bar knife with USMC stamped on it? Odds are not.
What if he was shocked? What if he got up and was shocked because Kaylee was there too?
Perhaps, and he's confused. And there's any number of ways I think that you can work this out in your mind. I thought about the idea that he may have climbed onto the bed with them, and he's there, and he kind of unsheathes the knife and then crawls on top. However, the one thing that I had put forward from the beginning with this case is that I felt as though that whoever perpetrated was going to be super saturated with blood. There's no way to get past it. I've worked in the morgue, all right, a long time. And I have, forgive me, I mean, I've been super saturated with blood, over my surgical gown that I'm wearing, because you don't change out. You go to the next case. At the end of the day, it's a bloody mess. Now you've got 4, and these are not deceased individuals. These are individuals that have life. They're reacting to pain. And every time that knife is either inserted or they're slashed, pain center is going to fire. And we just imagine, for anybody that's listening to me right now, reflect upon any time you've ever even nicked the tip of your finger, even a paper cut.
Oh, yeah.
How painful that is.
Yeah.
Imagine having this steel driven through your body over and over. And this is
it's unimaginable.
This is a robust knife, my friend.
Yeah.
And it's meant specifically for this, not what he purposed it for, but our troops, well, our Marines, Coasties, and naval personnel have carried this knife since before World War II. The USMC had an entire field manual that was dedicated to the utility of the combat K-bar knife, where they would teach CQB with a knife, going back years and years and years, how to use this thing. Its main purpose, and knives have been used for any number of reasons in the field with the military, but this knife was specifically used in order to do great bodily harm with it. And it's a very robust weapon, very robust weapon.
And we've never recovered the actual weapon.
No.
From him. We don't know where that is.
No. I was in a discussion not too long ago, and, if you try to go with the theory, which I don't know if it really holds water, because there's a lot of people out there that will say that, well, he was a burgeoning serial killer. Well, first off, I would ask you about that supposition. What proof do you have of that? Okay, because anybody can say that. I do know this for a fact. He's a mass killer, all right? You get, I don't know, some people say 2, some people say 3. You get 3 or more, and you're a mass killer at that point in time. That's what he is. I have no information about serial killer, but there are people out there that say, well, he's taken this knife and he's sequestered it somewhere because he wants to use it. He's been allegedly studying serial killers. He spent a lot of time at DeSales, both as an undergrad and a master's student.
He studied, I forget her name, but he studied under someone
Catherine
really famous.
Ramsland.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Catherine. I've been on panels with Catherine. And that was another thing that was really chilling for me personally, is that, I mean, I'm not, great friends with her.
But you knew her before this all happened.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I knew Catherine. As a matter of fact, I had been on a panel with her at Duquesne with Dr. Cyril Wecht. I got invited up there to go speak, and she was there. And I had met her prior to that, but we were on a panel together there. And then a year ago, I was actually at CromCon, and she and I were actually on air together at CromCon. Of course, not a word was mentioned about Kohberger at all. I got to hand it to her. She has kept the lid on it the entire time. Now, as soon as he pled, she has made comments since then, and that's.
I can't imagine what must be going through.
Well,
her head.
let me just interject this. I was actually thinking about this on the way here to the studio today. There is this fear that you have as an instructor, because people will, and I never thought about it, and until many years ago, I had several people that had planted the seed in my brain. You never know who you're talking to. You never know who's paying tuition, or even if you're doing podcasts, you don't know who's out there. You have no way of knowing.
You don't.
Everybody's ingesting this stuff, and so you really, and I've thought about the position that it has put Dr. Ramsland in, and she. There's no way that she could have known about this on any level. No. And look, I mean, as far as ticking the boxes, all the academic boxes, he's supposed to be this sterling student. And we've heard about this from a criminology standpoint. Now, I've taken exception many times with people that try to conflate criminology and forensics, and they're not the same thing at all. Criminology is a subdivision of sociology, all right? It's a study of criminal behavior and groups of criminals. They'd love to go to prisons and study these people and behaviorists and all that sort of stuff. It ain't forensic science. However, Dr. Ramsland became pretty well known. There were several articles that were written about it. DeSales was actually one of the early schools that had a standalone house.
Yeah, they literally bought it for crime scenes, right?
Yeah, and West Virginia University has one. I have one at Jacksonville State.
Oh, you do?
It's in our building, but it's 2,000 square feet with individual rooms, bathrooms, bedrooms.
So you take like famous cases in the past that you don't tell your students what they are,
No,
obviously.
No, don't do that. We create cases that
create them from scratch.
Yeah, we create them from scratch.
Well, she was taking historical cases, I believe, right?
And walking students through. But there's a lot of utility in that, for what we're trying to convey to students.
You have to teach.
You have to teach it all. And even with criminology students, you walk them through this process of, what the police do at the scene. Now, if you've got somebody that's highly motivated, that's a behaviorist or fancies himself a behaviorist, you want to try to understand it even further. And so maybe you would refine the craft a little bit as best you can within that context without actually being around a forensic science instructor. And you'll go down that dark road, but there's no telling how many dark roads he's been on.
You get to, in his position, you get to ask all the questions that if you asked anywhere else, you'd be flagged as like the school shooter. But here, you're just the dude that's the student asking the right questions.
Yeah. I'll give you a fine example of this. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have now where people will walk up to me and they will say, "Look, I don't want you to think I'm crazy." And that's the way the conversation will start off.
Instead of no Diddy, they go no Kohberger.
It's like, yeah, go ahead and hit me. What you got? And I'll, it'll generally be about a famous case, or it'll be a relative that had died under suspicious circumstances a long time ago, and they want me to work the case for them backwards, not having any information. But those questions are asked, and you're right. It's all about the context of it. If I had, some Joe Schmo walking off the street and have no frame of reference for this conversation at all and say, yeah, my wife's been feeling kind of sick and her nail beds are turning a weird color. What do you think I can expect now? Her hair's falling out. And, I'm thinking, well, heavy metal exposure, and why are you asking me these questions? Are you putting something in her coffee? So you begin to think about that. But in an academic environment or a training environment for law enforcement, all you got to do is go back to Golden State Killer.
Yep.
He was a cop, and he knew how cops worked.
He got caught 50 years later or something like that?
A long time after. My buddy
Scary
Paul
Holes,
did the legwork on that. Scary individual, and he possessed that next level knowledge. Now, he was a serial perpetrator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if we go down that rabbit hole on that, we'll be there for a long time. That case is dark.
It is dark. It's very, very dark.
Good on the detectives, though, years later, never letting that case go and actually, like, dead to rights, getting the guy who did that.
Yeah, and I got to show some love here real quick, if you don't mind.
Please.
One of my favorite groups of people now is Othram Labs, and they're out of area just outside of Houston. And David Middleman, who is the president and founder of Othram, I view him as the Elon Musk of DNA.
The Elon Musk of DNA.
He is a brain that he and his wife both are PhD level forensic DNA specialists and genetic genealogy in particular. And he has a website that is actually, and this is something that's really close to my heart. It's called DNAsolves.com. And it's, the beauty of it is this: I can't tell you, Julian, how many unidentified bodies I stood over the course of my career. And I'm talking about skeletal remains, all these different. And his goal, this is one of the most altruistic things I've ever heard of. His goal is to literally clean out the database that we have in America of unidentified bodies. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about homicides, or we're just talking about dead bodies.
Yeah, that we don't know.
That no one knows who they are after all these years. And he's using his lab, and it's kind of self-funded. You go in, you look for something, maybe it's in your area, they're working the case, they have to get to a certain border or boundary with that financially to flip the switch to start working on it. And they've cleared, I think so far, they've cleared well in excess of 300 cases so far. Wow. But there are thousands out there. Anyway, that's, and he has.
Was he on the Golden State case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I haven't confirmed. He may have been, I don't know. They may have been involved in another case too, but we'll see. We'll see what comes out. We'll see.
Is it the case I'm thinking?
I don't know. I'll see.
Okay.
But, it's amazing what they can do because there's, I cover their cases periodically on my podcast, and, they found a skull out in California that had actually been taken from a grave robbery that had taken place, and a lady had been dead for 140 years, and they got her identified. Somebody had the skull and got her identified through descendants of her family. And so with most of these cases with forensic genetic genealogy, it's going to be your cousins that point back to the point of origin with all of that. And of course, that's what's taken. Great. Yeah. So it's really fascinating stuff.
Wow.
To be able to kind of unspin a lot of the stuff that is so tangled and lost. It's lost to time many times, and it's weird. We've entered into this new world where some of these questions that we've had forever and ever. I remember. Even as a young investigator down in New Orleans, we had boxes of skeletal remains down there. Boxes, yeah. Bodies that had been recovered, say, from
sitting in
the
the
Mississippi
locker.
River, or Lake Pontchartrain, or found on the side of the road, where the bodies were so, decayed and desiccated and everything else that you take the tissue off of it and you just retain the skeletal remains. There's no identifying dental features, no restorations or anything. And even if you had it, you couldn't go back because it's great if you want to do a dental exam on an unidentified body, but it ain't worth the gunpowder to blow it hell if you don't have something to compare it to in the antemortem state. Right. And so now with these databases that they're using, they can take that one sample of DNA and run it back, and people that have voluntarily given up their DNA, to do genealogy, it's sitting there in a data bank somewhere, and they can take this data. And then not only does Othram employ forensic DNA people, they employ genealogists as well. So they've got this melding that goes on there, and it's pretty fascinating to kind of see it. It's something that, you know, I still have memories of putting bodies in ground in mass graves in body bags where you keep them as long as you can, and you put, you know, little aluminum bracelets on the ankle, the wrist. You secure the bag. You put another security marker on there, almost like you think about like an 18-wheeler, how it's locked on the back. With that, it's kind of the same principle. And I think about, you know, going back all those years about, you know, we just didn't know what to do with the bodies. Thankfully, medical examiners and coroners have gotten away from cremating bodies, which is a huge problem.
Yeah. What was the one I just heard of where they cremate? Oh, yeah. Virginia Roberts Giuffre.
Yeah.
Out in Australia. Cremated.
Yeah. I'll give you
Right
one
away.
better than that. Michael Jordan's dad.
He was cremated right away? I didn't even know that.
They didn't even know who he was. They found him in the creek, and he was a homicide victim.
Oh, my God.
I know. And they raised, as you can imagine, they raised 40 counts of hell about it, you know, because his daddy was missing. They found him in Marlborough County, South Carolina.
Yeah.
It's a little bitty coroner's office. The coroner didn't have a storage facility. And
So
what are you going to,
cremated.
he can't take the body home with him. You know, you can't, they're underfunded. They don't have a state medical examiner. They're a coroner system. So the only choice he had was to have the body cremated after he had, you know, had the dentition examined and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, my God.
And that's how they eventually got him identified. Yeah. Yeah.
It's wild, all the little things that have to happen after something like this happens that involve, you know, record keeping and bookkeeping and storage space and like normal human shit, but that directly impact the case when you can't take the proper actions.
You're right. And going back to what you said in your introduction about me, about history, is that I teach my students, I try to broaden it out a little bit and say, look, I know you're here for forensics. You want to be investigators, but you're also, you're a historian.
Yeah.
You might be the only person that ever documents that this person ever walked the face of the planet. If you don't check all those boxes at that point in time, and look, I've gone back and looked at records that were generated back in the 50s, and I'm thinking, well, this person didn't give two hoots in hell about this person.
Right.
Because there might be 2 or 3 lines written about them, and then it's just kind of cast off.
Well, think about it, not to be cynical, but what's a place where people think about like the DMV, right?
It's the same principle.
A lot of times you'll have people there that aren't the happiest people working there, whatever, you know, they're government workers, and, you know, they run someone through real fast so that the person has to come back and fix their license unnecessarily 2 weeks later.
Yes.
Not a big deal. It's an inconvenience for the person. It's annoying that happened.
Yeah.
But the same principle can apply to a guy who, you know, has indigestion from lunch. He's like, what am I doing with that body? All right, just put it over.
Yeah, no.
And then 60 years later, you don't know who it is.
You don't know who it is. You go to some massive operation like Office of Chief Medical Examiner in Manhattan or LA County, you know, where they deal in such a volume that most people can't even begin to comprehend how many bodies pass through. And they've gotten really good now. And we've done it for some time. They generate blood cards and DNA sampling, you know, on the bodies that pass through so that they can retain that they'll always have it. And now we're going to see remarkable things, I'd say, in the next half decade relative to how bodies are identified and what's going to really change is the expectation that the public has, because now the standard has been raised.
Right.
And if you don't meet that standard, even if you're out in East Egypt somewhere, you're still going to be held to that. You know, we get that all the time, these television shows that come on. Well, last night I saw this on TV. You mean you can't do this out here at the scene? You know, and of course, you know, art imitating life or life imitating art, it's going to happen one way or another.
Real quick, Joseph, I have to go to the bathroom, but
Sure.
when we come back, we'll go back to the Kohberger scene and
You
keep
bet,
that
buddy.
going.
You bet.
All right, we're back. We just did Just did a whole podcast off air there for like 40 minutes without
That's why I like
starting
coming
back
here,
up.
Man. It's always fun to talk.
It is a
always
lot of fun to talk.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if all that was kosher for camera, but some of it would have been really good.
Yeah. But inquiring minds will never know. So you never know.
Well,
we're going to take it to the grave. Hey, wait, what's he doing over there?
listen, Joe was recording the whole thing.
Hey, there. Okay,
So,
well, the
now
world that we live in, I'm not surprised.
Now I got that Epstein blackmail on you, my friend.
Yeah.
Pause. Anyway, but we actually will talk about some of the Epstein stuff that you were showing us, which was wild, because obviously at the middle of that whole fucked up case is the fact that you had a guy who killed himself and it's a crime scene and there's evidence there, and now they're trying to feed us this bullshit that it doesn't even start with the body. It's like, oh, it's not even, there are no files and all that. We'll talk about that. But I want to finish going through the Kohberger thing, because you were doing an amazing job walking through that case. So where we left off shortly before the break was we had been talking about the Sheath, and you had been speculating, that this may have been some very fucked up like sexual fantasy where then he dropped the Sheath and became a monster and did this whole thing. But then after he kills Mogan and Kaylee up there, who again, he may have found Kaylee unexpectedly, he then has to find a way out of the building.
He's got to exfil. He's got to get back out of this place, this complicated maze that still baffles me that, he made it through the structure. There's so much of this that's it's indicative of somebody that has at least paid attention to the layout of this place to the point where he can navigate in the dark, make his way through this place, and still get out and seemingly leave nothing behind but a knife sheath. Now, there was some talk at one point in time that there had been a bloody footprint that was left behind by maybe a van shoe, like vans.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got a very distinctive pattern, may have been in blood. And again, we still don't know a lot about that other than the fact that one of the things that was pointed out was that there were other people in that house that wore vans as well. So we don't know. Hopefully some of that's going to come out in the record as more and more of the stuff is being released, because even as we're talking right now, there's still wrangling that's going on about when there's going to be a major data dump, and seemingly, and it's kind of an interesting little aside. I've been covering this thing for so long. How long ago was it?
It was November 13th, 2022.
Yeah, no, I started then, but recently when Dateline did their Friday night show, that they did this big reveal. No offense to Dateline, I don't watch Dateline. I don't watch shows like this. No, it's just not my thing, man. So I wake up Saturday morning and turn on my phone, look at it, and I see that I'm tagged in an image, and it says, wow, obviously a fan of Joe Scott's, and my handle is like Joe Scott Forensics on X. Well, I'll look at it, and it is a screenshot from Dateline, and my image is on it. And my wife and I, as we always do, we're old, we sit there early in the morning and drink coffee together, and I'm like,
you drink coffee?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
What the shit? And I like showed it, and immediately it's like she turned to ashen. It bothered her down to her core, because I'd been talking about this thing for so long in the news and this sort of thing. He, as it turns out, according to Dateline, in this data dump that they initially did, or this information that they acquired, he had been watching all of these shows that I was appearing on, and not just me, other people. And they had a digital record of this stuff that he had been viewing. And so it gave me a thought back to our earlier supposition that I put forward about, who's listening, who's watching. It really kind of made me pause for a second. I'm thinking, what did I say in that interim between when this went down back in November to the point that they finally put the bracelets on his ass. What had I said during that middle period? What did any of us say? Did we give him any kind of insight into, because, it was back then that I was saying, whoever did this, their car was like a rolling crime scene, because unless you covered the seats in some manner, which he may have, you're not going to be able to get out of this without leaving some remnant behind. It goes back to my forensic hero, Edmond Lacard. Every contact leaves a trace. That when you sit in this car, you're going to transfer certain elements into this environment, whether it be hair, skin, or blood. And, how do you get past that relative to these barriers that you have to create in order to ensure that you're not going to leave a trace of yourself in this vehicle? Because if you extend this line of logic out and you begin to think about, well, if he went so far to buy a Dickies outfit to cover himself with, and he's bought the balaclava, he has probably got gloves, he's going to walk into this environment. Did he take other precautions when he got into the car to shield the interior of the car? Well, by the time they finally, get the car, which is another kind of infamous story, when, they raided the parents' house over in the Poconos, he's in there in his underwear, and he's like wearing gloves, and he's transferring trash all around the place, trying to bag it separately to keep things. He had apparently an awareness of the types of things that we did. I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm just saying what
perfectly normal behavior. If you're his family watching this, seems right.
What did I say anything in the interim that? And he's watching everything that's out there. He's been studying this for years and years. It did give me pause at that moment in time, though, to think about this.
I understand why you would have that, because you're a deep thinking, very moral guy. But at the same time, it's like whenever a case like this goes down, once the unthinkable has happened, it's going to be reported on, and it's going to be speculated on everywhere.
Yeah,
Someone's it's not even just the prisoner's dilemma of like, well, someone's going to do it. It's also like the public wants to know how these things happen, and then what do you mean you don't have the killer?
Yeah.
And then you have to explain, well, here's how you could hypothetically cover tracks and things like that. You're doing your job, and like, if not to be harsh, but if the detectives and the FBI and all the resources on it aren't smart enough to be a half a step ahead of that, and a half a step only needs to be 3 hours sometimes, that's kind of on them.
Yeah, it is. And that was the big cry that went up. And what a lot of people don't understand about the Moscow Police Department, and I found this out really early on, you are supposed to pronounce it Moscow. Just like Costco,
they don't like Russia.
Don't dig on Moscow, so it has to be Moscow. So I had to learn that. But anyway,
very, very aggressive.
So they're a department that is in total is about 24 people. Just let that sink in for a second. And so they're having to invite these other agencies in, whether it's the state police or certainly the feds, to give them a hand with this. I think that probably many of us that were kind of observing this, and certainly my colleagues in forensics, are thinking, well, have they done everything that they needed to do to lock this thing? I'm not talking about even processing the scene. I'm just talking about securing the scene until those that are at maybe a higher altitude can actually view this thing and begin to understand how to work your way through this to collect all of the evidence. First off, recognize it, preserve it, and then collect it after you've documented everything. Did they ensure that was going to happen? There were some troubling moments, I think, along the way. One of the biggest things that kind of, I guess it was probably 2 or 3 days afterwards, there was something that kind of struck me as odd that had occurred. The coroner from out in that jurisdiction gave an interview. And that's something that...
The coroner did?
Yeah, that's something that doesn't happen most of the time, because if you just envision, that's the way I describe it to my students, you have an investigative bubble, and there's there's really nobody that should penetrate that. And there are certain expectations of people that are within that environment of your responsibilities. And one of the biggest responsibility is don't say anything. And because you don't know if that's going to damage the case. And the coroner would have very intimate knowledge of walking in. Well, she had stated early on in the first interview that she gave that they were apparently all asleep. Well, as it turns out, they were not all asleep. As a matter of fact, nothing could be further from the truth. So I knew something was up when I heard that, and it makes you wonder about
what else they fucked up.
Yeah, what else had happened? We were that close. I say we. I'm not going to take personal possession of this thing, but it was that close to everything within that house being eradicated relative to evidence. Because before Kohberger was actually arrested, they had agreed to have a crime scene cleanup company come out and begin to purge this place. I guess they wanted to get it back on the market or whatever was going to happen because this thing was still privately owned. As a matter of fact, there is actually an image of a crime scene cleanup truck backed up to the door, and they have created a plastic cave to walk into this thing. They had just, I don't remember the exact date, but they had just hooked Kohberger up. And he had defense counsel for him in Pennsylvania. And they were like, whoa. We want our own people to come and take a look at this before you go through and clean this thing up, quote unquote.
If they had done that.
Yeah, I know. And that's how close it was. And that goes to the idea that, we could chase this rabbit all day long about tearing down the structure.
Yeah.
Which is something that has stuck in my craw and others.
Because they did it too soon?
I just don't think it was wise to do it at all. You wouldn't have any way of knowing, but Julian, I've worked a lot of homicides in my career, okay, between New Orleans and Atlanta. I don't ever recall over that period of time where I had a homicide scene that was in a structure where the structure had been razed, like just taken down to the ground.
Didn't they wait, they did that December 2023, though? They waited over a year. So you still think, because you're saying, if I'm understanding this correctly, because the case was ongoing at the time, it had not been adjudicated.
Yeah, and the only rationale they could give is that it creates bad memories and it makes people sad. I don't care. I don't care. It makes sense. I like to look at Parkland High School, and they put chain link fence around the thing and they locked it down. And one of the reasons was that they gave is they couldn't afford to provide security for it. And I'm thinking, and I know a bit more now, but one of the big issues with the structure, as we've talked about, is I think the acoustics in there. You begin to think about, what did people hear at any particular time? Do you recall that there was still a roommate that was downstairs?
Weren't there two? There was Dylan, and then there was
another
girl.
one that was on the parking pad.
What was her name?
level.
Emily?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah.
I might have made that
and
up.
she was physically in there, and you're thinking, well, is it possible she could have heard something? And so if you ever even had a desire to take a jury out there, like they did with Parkland, which I'll never forget that day when they took the jury members out there, and they had the two representatives from the press corps that walked through it. That place was frozen in time. It was that important to them at that moment in time.
They did that with Murdoch, too.
Yeah, they did. They preserved everything.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in cases where the jury was taken out to scenes. It doesn't happen every time. It's a pain in the butt. Defense attorneys, prosecution hates it too, and this is why. Because if you're questioning somebody before a jury in this kind of protected environment, which court is, you control the dialogue. People that walk into an environment like this you can't control their inner dialogue or what their assessment is. They're looking at everything and they're taking it all in, and you can't say yay or nay either way to them. They're observing this place, and I think that attorneys absolutely, they do not welcome these opportunities to take juries out there and revisit these places. So it just seemed as though that it was an unreasonable risk to take when there was no need to take that risk at all, that they should have just let the structure intact. And I never could balance that in my mind, but they took it down. They took it down to the ground, man. I mean, it's gone.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, because that does make sense to me, that you would wait until the case is over to do something like that. Because it also makes total sense that in the middle of a college campus where there's supposed to be happy kids in the time of their life, you know, you don't want something like this being there. And that place is haunted. But it does make you wonder why they couldn't put like some sort of box fence around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a 20-foot high Bin Laden kind of fence, just to be like, okay, just
with concertina wire around the top of it. I don't understand. And it's not, hey, look, man, it's your world. I'm just living in it. I don't understand why they did it. Maybe they have a better explanation, other than it made people sad.
Yeah. Which again, I get that for college kids, but you do it, to your point, and I agree with you. You have to think about the bigger picture here.
You have to. You only get literally one shot at it.
Yeah.
And if this had gone sideways, at any point in time, I think that would be a point in time that they would. And look, they talk about the Faro system that they walked in with. That's FARO, where this thing shoots thousands and thousands of images per second. It gives you a detailed digital reconstruction of the scene. I'm not going to say it's like the holodeck on the Star Trek: The Next Generation, but they can recreate it.
Yeah.
And they create the doll houses that they'll bring in and kind of take the floors off bit by bit and kind of, but you'll never recapture what the place was actually like, in that sense. And I would think that you would want to have that in reserve. All right. It just seems like an unnecessary risk.
Now, what do we know? You had kind of gone through the possibilities of where you could enter this place earlier.
Yes.
And stuff like that. We went through the sliding doors. We had it up on the screen so people could see it as well. There's also the lower level up front where if it's unlocked, you get in there, or if someone knew the code, because all these kids knew the code, you get in there. But what do we... where do we assume he first gained entry right now?
The sliders.
The sliders.
The sliders. That's the second floor level that he parked up, probably behind. There's one way in, one way out.
So he pulled into the driveway.
Yeah. Well, no, up behind, like up the hill behind, and then made his way back down the hill to the sliders, and he was able to enter through there.
And that's the vantage point where you could see into that third floor room from up there, whatever that is, that lot.
You're looking like this, and you're looking down that hill and into that third bedroom.
And that's a parking lot up there?
Yeah, it's an adjacent area up there where you can park your car and then turn around. You have to come back out.
Okay. All right, so he goes in there. As you've also laid out very well, this is a complex layout internally on the house, where the staircases are, where the hallways are, how you get from floor to floor. Once he comes downstairs and discovers Xana, and then therefore Ethan, and Ethan might have been, we don't know yet until they release all the information, he might have actually been the only one who might have been sleeping, but Xana definitely wasn't. Once he discovers her, begins to stab her and kill her, then whatever ends up happening, he ends up killing Ethan right there. I imagine that happens in a relatively quick period, meaning it didn't take 10 minutes for him to do that, but he finishes that. Where does he exit the house?
He comes back out through the sliders.
Also through the sliders.
And that's when Dylan would have seen him. When he is exiting, she talks about how he passed by her. And
passed by her door or passed by her?
Yeah, passed by her. Her door was open like this. She looked outside of the door, and she's the one that heard someone say, and I'm paraphrasing here.
There's someone here.
Well, that, and also, don't worry, I'm going to help you. And that had been floating through the ether as well. So that in and of itself is troubling. And I've thought about this quite a bit relative to if we go with the idea that this is, first off, tinged with, a lot of anger and hatred, because there seems to be a lot of overkill here. If there's some kind of sexual thing that's going on and you don't have to have sex for it to be sexually motivated.
Right.
You just rip the person to shreds. After killing 4 people, the question is, why didn't he kill Dylan?
Yes.
I think that probably he was completely spent. This is an adrenaline pump that he is on at this point in time. He sat up there. He's got himself worked up. He goes in there. You can say worked up, aroused, whatever the case might be. I don't know. That's for brighter people than me to try to discover. But he goes in there, perpetrates this crime on the 3rd floor, and then he's surprised. That's another boost of adrenaline. Right at that point in time, he knows that they can't escape. If he's going to get away with this thing, he's going to have to do away with them. That is Xana and Ethan. Maybe she retreated to the room. She's found in her room. She's been killed. Ethan's been killed. Now he's going to try to get out. And apparently, as he is walking down the hall, he looks right at Dylan. That's when she sees this. And she refers to it as a guy. He's got really bushy eyebrows. He's kind of an athletic built, but he's not muscular. I think she described him as like a runner or swimmer type body.
Wearing a balaclava.
Well, she didn't say balaclava. All she said is he had a mask, and I could just see his eyes. She also made a reference at some point in time, or somebody picked up on this, that they thought he was carrying a vacuum cleaner. And I've heard, and when I say that, which seems so bizarre, some people have wondered if he had an evidence vac with him. And I'm thinking that's something that we use to gather things up, almost like a handy vac. Mm. And if you can't make anything else out, why would you say he had a vacuum cleaner? It seems very specific. And no one has ever been able to kind of prove that. I think that that's not what she saw. It was something else, maybe the knife he was still holding on to, certainly absent the sheath.
This girl, Dylan, got a lot of, and this is the problem with cases like this. When they instantly go viral socially, you get all these internet detectives all over it, and it takes on a life of its own that's beyond the facts of the case. And when you look at the timing, she wakes up the next day seemingly disoriented, like, I feel like something happened last night. I don't know. Calls her friend to come over. Friend comes over. Dylan is outside the house, and she's like, I don't know. Something might have happened in there last night. And then I believe that friend's boyfriend is the one that went in and first discovered them and came out and called the police. And so people are like, well, how the fuck could you not call the police at 4 a.m. in the morning when you thought someone was in the house, and even when you saw them? In your experience dealing with criminal cases, though, and dealing with people who are shell-shocked at scenes, and, something like this is completely incomprehensible to them, do you see that in your opinion, is a lot of the behavior or, the way it went down from Dylan's perspective, and particularly even going down in the basement with the other roommate, pretty, I don't want to say normal, but pretty in line with...
There's nothing normal within this world. I've interviewed people in the past that were bordering on catatonia, where they've got the 1,000-yard stare.
Yep.
They're vibrating like this. And the fact that, your brain may bear witness or something, or maybe your brain is creating scenarios that something awful has happened, and it just kind of goes into protection mode. And this is not like, we're talking about a college kid here that's never probably seen a drop of angry blood spilt, okay? And she's in this environment. There's no telling how anybody is going to react.
Right.
So the fact that this happened, to me, is not surprising at all. The troubling thing about it, though, is that you've got this gigantic window of time that has now elapsed from the moment that those souls departed this earth to the first time police put their eyes on their remains. And me, one of the things that we we examine or that we try to glean information from are the bodies relative to postmortem changes.
Right.
And so that's going to skew data. And of course, time is very important here. Time is what this case is all about. You know, when were these particular markers hit? And then you kind of go into this zero zone here where nothing seems to be happening, but yet the bodies are still changing at this point in time. Body temperature is dropping, rigor setting in, livor mortis is setting in. How are you going to be able to assess that? Well, by the time the coroner gets out there, the coroner will not have arrived immediately. They're still going to be even further down the timeline. So any kind of data that you're trying to establish that might help you to really zone in on the times. Thankfully, they kind of have these digital markers, you know, like with the food delivery and all these sorts of things. But and certainly the CCTV of the girls at the food truck, that gives you kind of a back end time. But going into the front, you know, if you're trying to adjust this to try to understand the changes that have happened, your data is really going to be skewed.
It makes it hard.
Yeah, it does.
For sure. The thing, and you actually mentioned it, unrelated, when we were talking about them raising the house.
Yeah.
And therefore you couldn't go in there and understand the sound and stuff like that. But that's the thing that really is so hard for me to understand. Mm-hmm. And again, my explanation is that someone is in a scared catatonia and they don't know what's real and what's not, which I think is a perfectly good explanation. However, if someone weren't in that, what makes it hard to understand is how, for example, someone like Xana, who is awake and has fight back marks, which means she probably screamed.
Yeah.
And it was probably not once. It was probably a continued scream or whatever. The idea that you wouldn't hear something like that is hard for me to put it in the shoes of someone else who was in there and try to understand what it would be like to be catatonic and not even be able to hear. You know what I mean? It's very hard to process.
Yeah, it is. And again, we don't know. Well, if you just take the example of Xana, okay, and you think about the injury she sustained on her hand, which are not postmortem injuries. These happened in life. There are focal areas of hemorrhage, I would assume. They're talking about these being defensive injuries. They're very deep. And then to boot, you've got all of the stab wounds that are being inflicted upon her. We still don't know anatomically what the wound track is either. Did he actually nail an area in her body that would have pretty quickly incapacitated her, where she's not going to make a noise? Was she so shocked by what was happening to her she didn't cry out? Because, you know, you're thinking this is kind of gymnastics you do, because you're thinking, okay, we've got 4 souls in this house. You're telling me that out of these 4 individuals that you don't have somebody screaming at the top of their lungs. And again, you know, thinking about the 2 roommates upstairs, how much alcohol did they have on board? You know, was there anything that was impeding their physical ability to respond? And again, we don't know.
Did he use a pillow too? You got to wonder that. Like you've seen, not even to get like Hollywood about it, but you see where people will sneak up on someone
and
in
put
the
his
sleep.
hand over their mouth.
Yep.
You know, but how are you going to do that with 2 individuals? How's one individual not going to be aware that it's happening to the other? You know, my fallback position is always, and I'm hoping that we're going to learn what the blood alcohol level is. How much alcohol did they have on board? They were ambulatory. It's not like they were, passed out in an alley somewhere. I mean, they made it back home with that mystery driver that brought them home, who a lot of people were looking at early on thinking, and it was just kind of a goodwill gesture on that person's part to bring them home.
It was like the designated driver for the fraternity.
Yeah. And, he got them back to their domicile, and they're upright. They made it up to the 3rd floor, so it's not like they're just completely passed out or anything. And again, hopefully those answers will be revealed.
All right, so The Getaway, though, because again, and you talked about it a little bit ago with the time in between when you're on TV and this guy is unknown and not caught yet. The Getaway happens and he doesn't get, I believe he doesn't get taken down until the week after Christmas. So it was like
New Year's Eve, I think.
Yeah, it was like 6 full weeks on the run.
Yep.
If I remember correctly, with what we have been given in public, they didn't start to look at him as a suspect until mid-December or something, so over a month after.
Yeah.
But he gets in his white Hyundai Elantra that he had turned off his phone when he was leaving Pullman, Washington. So his phone goes dark, but then his phone picks back up now somewhere just south of Moscow.
Yes.
And he takes a long, circuitous, like circle route back to Pullman.
Yeah, he does. And one of the interesting things was that was offered up. I guess it was the defense attorney had put out there. Well, he went stargazing that night. Well, the weather report that night was that you had a low ceiling of about 300 feet. It was socked in essentially. There was ice, and there was one point that was away from the city. They claimed that he had an interest in astronomy, and that he just went out there to this isolated, lone location just so that he could gaze up at the stars. And I guess people would say, well, what's wrong with that? It's a free country. You can go do what he wants to do. Yeah, but when you couple that with the fact that the phone is off and that he's allegedly gone to this location, I don't know, maybe he did go to that location. Maybe that's where the knife is. Maybe it's in the middle of a river out there or beneath a rock in the middle of the river. We have no way of knowing, what happened in that interim period. What's really fascinating is that the next morning
he comes back.
And that blows my mind. He pings outside the house at that point in time. But here's another little point along the continuum. If you go back from there, they had his phone moving around that house, I think 11 or 12 times in the weeks, leading up to this point, which always has kind of captured my imagination. Again, you're talking about surveilling an area, trying to understand the comings and goings, and who occupies the space, and then to fail so desperately at this when it comes time to do it, because you're after one person, apparently, allegedly, but yet you don't account for the other 3 people that are going to be in the house, but yet you've spent all of this time, the super villain here that is surveilling the area, and he's picking out all the points of ingress and egress and all these sorts of things. And he's got this, he's got his Dickies on, and he's got his knife that he's gotten off of Amazon and so forth and so on. And he's being so very careful. You think about all of that, and how did you screw it up this bad? Well, he certainly did. The one thing that kind of really threw a wrench into this whole process is that when the police took a loop themselves. There's like a big, I can't remember what the distance is, like 15 or 20 miles. They took a loop around potential routes where they went to every convenience store, church, anybody that had a camera. And a couple of times they did catch what appeared to be a white Elantra that was going past, but it was going so fast you couldn't make out any kind of details on the driver. The FBI tried to frame it because they're good at this, framing make and model of the vehicle, and they were able to narrow it down to like a 3-year period. But you couldn't see the license plate on the car either. And so it took some time before they actually wound up lighting back on him as a suspect.
Now, you said he was there like 11 times in the weeks,
11,
something like
12,
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that data, were we able, I assume, to ping where the car sits and he's just sitting there? Meaning the phone data shows that it's still...
I'm assuming, I don't have that information, but I'm assuming that would probably, because most of the time when these things begin to ping like this, it'll show movement. And if it's hitting right there and it stays there for a protracted period of time, I would think that they could do whatever it is that they do relative. They talk about geofencing and all these sorts of things.
So there's two big mistakes that from my very amateur seat stand out right away. Number one, he left the Sheath there. Number two, the get to and getaway and the build up before where he's visiting there even with the cell phone data. Very bad at covering your tracks on both sides of it. However, getting into the house, as you said, complex structure, seems to have known it very well, was able to effectively neutralize everything in his way with the exception of Dylan, which you speculated could be because he was spent at that point. So, unfortunately, he went in there, and even if he intended to kill one person, was able to have enough time and wherewithal to kill four, which made it even way worse than it was to begin with. If he went there, though, with the car 11 times ahead of time, I wonder if, this is a college house. People are in class during the day. They don't lock it. I got to assume he went in there.
Is he a creeper? Yeah. I mean, would he have the ability to go in there? Because, I've thought about this, thinking about just trying to size this place up. If people were common, even strangers, to this location, and you happen upon one of the roommates, hey, I thought this was Mary's house or whatever. He happens to be in there. Oh, no. There's no Mary that lives here, and he's off. Well, I don't know. Maybe one of them had seen him there at some point in time. I don't know if that ever happened, but would he have the intestinal fortitude to do that beforehand, or did he just hang out on the periphery? Because if he's a burgeoning sex offender, with this complex thing that's going on with his psychopathology, did he get in there to try to take trophies? And I'm thinking about clothing, anything like that, any kind of garment that might belong to her. Well, there was nothing, to my knowledge at least, that was found at his apartment, Pullman, that would give that indication, because some of these people like to do that. And again, people throw around the term serial killer. To the best of my knowledge, he's not a serial killer. He is a mass killer. And I don't know if that was his purpose. Some people point at the knife to say that, well, this is something he wanted to hold on to. It's like a carpenter loving the finishing hammer that they always use. Well, if you suppose that this was the first time out, did it prove to be all that he wanted and more as far as an instrument of death? Well, it certainly worked well at that point in time, but why would he? Did he begin to feel the heat of this and decided, in that 6-week period, did he decide to get rid of the knife somewhere else where it might never be found? Who knows? I have no idea.
He drove across the country. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, with Daddy in tow. Yeah, I mean, for all I know, he drove up to the Snake River and threw it in there. I have no idea. And that's going to be an interesting question. But the thing about it, though, Bubba, is that this guy's not being made to allocute, and for me, it's incredibly bothersome, particularly when you consider what he has put these families through, because essentially he has out and out lied about everything.
They were trying to come up with up a week before.
Yeah,
or someone else.
It's actually like 3 days before he actually copped to it. He has been lying the entire time, but yet they're not going to put him in a position where he is being forced to say precisely what he did. And it just seemed to me that you could leverage this agreement by saying, okay, you have to stand up there and do this, just like BTK.
Yep.
Just like Jodi Arias, you have to stand up there and say what you did, and you have to tell everybody what you did.
And why, effectively.
Well, yeah, you could ask him why and the motivations. But, this is what I think. I think that he is probably so twisted. First off, at the time of this recording, he has not appeared in court. However, I think I would be surprised if he did say anything about what his motivations were or anything like that. It seems to me, because he had studied these killers for so long, he still probably views himself on some level as some half-ass academic. And he wants to call the shots relative to when he's going to make any kind of statement. And trust me, there will be a whole line of people that will want to talk to him. And there will be people from academia that will want to talk to him under the guise of saying, well, we just want to study him for the benefit of everybody else. And they'll write papers about him, and he'll have full attention here. And all along, these families are absent their babies for the rest of eternity.
Why did they make this deal? Like that's what I don't understand. Like, if they made the deal where he then had to allocute, it makes sense. But to make a deal, I mean, the Gonzalez family is very upset about it. And listen, I think it's like 2 of the families are upset about it, and the other 2 are like, it's over. We're putting it behind us. We're glad to have, the actual case not have to whatever. And they may still be, I don't know this for a fact, they may still be very disappointed that it's not allocuting, but all in all, they're trying to do the best they can to move on with their lives after this. But the families who are upset about this, I fully understand that. And I don't understand the logic unless the case was for some reason they felt like weak and like he might get off on some of it. Why would they make this deal, in your opinion?
Well, he's got 5 charges, okay? First charge he's got is felony burglary, which is, and in the charging document itself, you can actually see this online. It talks about, again, this is me paraphrasing, burglary for the purpose of committing murder, okay? And then for each child that was butchered, there's an individual charge for them. I don't know how much whittling down you could do of that, or offer up any kind of alternatives as far as sentencing or anything like that, because it is what it is. He planned to go in there and do this. Now, maybe if he came forth and said, yeah, Maddie was my target, I was surprised by the rest of them. Maybe that would be the one big charge that they had, and they would reduce everything else. I have no idea. I don't know if they felt as though that it was, bird in hand is the kind of view that they were taking of this. But up until that point when he entered the plea, he was proclaiming his innocence, and he was saying that he was not guilty. And all of a sudden he has this come to Jesus moment where he says, oh, no, I did it. Don't believe me? Go look at the tape. He's standing there. He confesses to every bit of it, or at least says that he did this. Now, he doesn't give an explanation. I don't know that we'll ever have an explanation. That's going to be for a lot of people to kind of jaw jack over for, forever and ever, amen, until the next one of these kind of tragedies happens. But either way, I think that it's less than, probably for certain family members, probably less than satisfying, I would think.
Hard for me to even try to imagine that, like what I might be thinking.
Yeah, well, this is the thing about it. There will be witness impact statements, and I'm going to be watching this very carefully. I can tell you from my perspective. I do hope, my heart of hearts, I do hope that the families are given every bit of the information about what happened to their children, if they haven't had it already, and that they have somebody that has aided them in writing out a statement. And I don't care if it takes 2 days to do it or 3 days to do it. That now they cannot directly address him. They address the court, because you see people in impact statements will turn sometimes and look at the accused.
They're not allowed to do that?
No, they're going, because the witness impact statement is supposed to actually impact the judge in making their decision about what they're going to do as far as punishment goes and those sorts of things. That's the purpose of it. But I do hope that as they are addressing the court, that they will be armed. I hope that the prosecution will have armed them with sufficient amount of information so that if he's not going to allocute, by God, the family is going to be able to state in open court that this is what, according to this is what you did to my kids, and you are admitting to this. This is what you did to my child. And they'll be able to hold forth on that and hold him accountable, at least to some degree. Because I still don't think that we understand the depth and the breadth of how violent this was. One thing that people always point out is that image that comes from the scene, where you've got what appears to be, and I'm not the forensic scientist that handled it. I can't say definitively that is blood, but people have said that that's blood trickling down the wall onto the foundation of the house. It comes out of the walls, and you can see it right there. It looks like blood, but forensically, we can't look at something and say that is blood. You have to test it. Right. But that gives you an idea of what type of bloodbath this may have been inside of that house. And if it's presenting outside the structure, you can only imagine what the interior of the house looked like.
Yeah, we have that image up right now. Joe's got that. That's on the outside.
That's on the outside. That's the foundation right there.
All right. Now, the judge, when he was arrested at the end of December 2022, and then had like the first hearings or whatever, the judge put the gag order on this case. And prior to that, prior to him being caught, the detectives were very limited with what they released on details because they were in the chase of him, and they didn't,
right.
I guess didn't want to give certain things away, even about the crime scene itself and what it looked like. And so we've gotten from some court documents since then that I guess are publicly available, we've gotten some detail of what went down. But the way I'm understanding is that we still, they're basically going to data dump on us after this is done, where they release everything, and we're going to actually, for the first time, just tell me if this is fair to say, understand exactly what that crime scene looked like. The
depth and breadth of it. Yeah, I think so. And the media is a big piece to this. They've pushed for this for some time. And you can say what you will about what their interests are here. Obviously, if it bleeds, it leads. And they will generate multiple articles about this after that data dump takes place. I will be contacted. They'll ask me to give comment about interpretation of it. What do I think? What can I draw from it? And that's all going to happen. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change a damn thing. These kids were still butchered. But we will have more detail. I think can I just say right now, one of the things that has really troubled me about this case is at his point of origin, we're talking about a kid that a grown man that is a heroin junkie that broke free of that, allegedly, and went on to climb these heights in academia. It always bothered me that out of all the places in the United States that he could have chosen to go and get a doctorate from, he decided on Washington State University. I don't know, maybe he was looking for a fresh start, because if you look at criminology PhD programs, there's 3 alone in Pennsylvania that you can get a PhD in criminology. Yeah. The northeastern corridor of the United States is like the home to some of the ton. Yeah, like Northeastern that's in Boston is considered to be one of the leading places in the country. What is it that was so special about Washington State? What is it that would drive you to travel all the way out there, several thousand miles, to go to that location and fly it into the side of the mountain as soon as you get there? Because he had arrived in the summertime. Okay, he had not even really done a semester, and he got a position as a teaching assistant.
He was fired from that too.
And he was, because of how abusive he was, particularly towards female students, allegedly.
Interesting.
And it makes me think, who was it there at Washington State? Because
You're good.
Okay. It's one thing for an individual to get a master's degree, all right? But when you go for a traditional PhD, particularly in something like criminology, most of the time you're going there to study under someone. Like ultimate Socratic method, you're sitting at their feet and you're learning. What academic font was he going there to sit beneath? That he was going to spend, because if you've ever talked to anybody that's in one of these like really intense PhD programs, it's like indentured servitude. We'll put a roof over your head, we'll feed you, we'll give you a little bit of a stipend, but you're going to work. You're going to work. You're going to work hard. You're going to have to teach all of my classes. You're going to have to grade all my papers. You're going to have to advise all of my undergraduate students. And oh, by the way, you got to do your research for your PhD, and you got to take your PhD courses, your core courses. He hadn't even made it through his first semester, and his ass gets fired. Why? What was it that happened that burned it all to the ground for him? And from an academic sense, why is it that he would go through all of this effort and target that location out there to go and study there? I have no idea. I've often wondered, did he have an awareness of somebody out there before he ever left Pennsylvania? I don't know. I don't know that that'll ever, it doesn't have to be any of these victims. Was he going out there for something else that had piqued his interest, for instance, that would drive him all the way out there as opposed to staying closer to home? I don't know. Maybe he just wanted a new start.
As a part of the gag order, though, we don't have any details on what detectives have uncovered digitally and things like that, yep. I imagine, right? Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what his, internet history was and the things that in the years leading up to that he did. Was it something so random where, he found Maddie online or something like that and just is a sick fuck who had some weird obsession?
I don't know. Yeah, and if not Maddie, maybe somebody else that, was his driver to go out there and study criminology at a doctoral level, or was his driver something else? You look back at like him creating these questionnaires even before he became a PhD student, asking these guys that had committed these horrible crimes that were incarcerated. I wanted, and they're very detailed, Julian. They're things like, what were your thoughts about leaving the scene of the crime? Did you think about leaving anything behind? What were your plans, going into it? Did you have a plan going into it? And, retrospectively, you look back at this, and this is really, really dark stuff.
Yep.
When you begin to think about it. And again, I'm taking this from the perspective of a college professor thinking about, well, if you've got a student that's asking these questions, what's the impetus behind it? Is it you're a burgeoning killer, or is it you truly have an academic interest in this?
Yeah. It gets so weird. There was in the Amazon documentary about this, mm-hmm. which was not the one you were in.
Right, I was in the Peacock one, yeah.
Yeah, the Amazon one is where they pretty
much... The James
much,
Patterson one, yeah.
Yeah, they do it strictly from the perspective of the victims' families involved and tell the story that way. But they put in there the people who ran the Facebook page about this. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
But the administrators of the, Mystery of the Idaho 4 Facebook page back when he was on the run had a character show up in there, an account called Papa Roger.
Mm-hmm.
And who was the 2014 serial killer? Roger, what's his name?
Yeah, the kid, what's his name? Can't remember.
Elliot Roger. Yeah, so... This was interesting for a litany of reasons because, first of all, when Kohberger got caught, the Papa Roger account disappeared from the internet completely. It couldn't be found. Secondly, when you look at the profile picture that he used, it was almost like an aged AI,
mm-hmm.
or cartoon of the side of Kohberger's face.
Yeah.
If you look at, if it's not perfect, but it's very similar. has the last name of a killer that he was educationally linked to studying at DeSales. He was very interested in Elliot Rodger and the stuff he had done. And Elliot Rodger, he had killed himself before, you know, he got arrested, but he had killed, I believe it was, he had targeted all these women in California back in 2014, and it stemmed from his anger and hatred of women for rejecting him. So he was like an incel type. And it is sinister to look at the posts that Papa Roger was putting on the Facebook page while Kohberger's on the run, because a lot of it, almost word for word in some cases, overlaps with the very questions that Kohberger was putting into his questionnaire of the previous killers when he was, quote unquote, studying it. And the inspiration, I don't even think you should call it that, but the ideological drawing upon he seemed to do with the naming of that account being Roger, and then looking at the nature of the crime, clearly targeting a female out of some sort of weird sexual rage and anger in all likelihood. Also probably because he was rejected in an incel or whatever. It is really, really sinister.
It's very dark. It certainly is. And, you know, people will take the term incel, and trust me, I was not as familiar with the construct as I am now in the wake of Kohberger. But the problem with the term, I think, is, first off, it's not a psychological diagnosis. You can't go into the DSM, the diagnostic manual, and find a diagnosis of being an incel, all right? There might be components that are contained therein, and I've found a lot of pop psychologists that are out there that throw the term around. They should know better, by the way. And I think that, again, that goes to they don't have any other way to kind of categorize him, and that's kind of the easy default position. It's almost like getting closure, you know, where we're avoiding, I think, many times with this idea of incel-like behavior, whatever that means. You know, they'll talk about issues of misogyny, you're walking away as a man, you're isolated, you share common views with other people that have, quote unquote, walked away. And I'm really wondering if we're missing a broader maybe diagnosis or an examination of him and his behaviors, because this is not something that he suddenly decided to participate in. This is something that has been a lifelong journey towards. And maybe he has that commonality with other people, I don't know, that have perpetrated horrible crimes. Maybe those things do exist. But I think that the one thing that should be learned from Kohberger is to try to understand what the genesis of his turning into this thing that he has become is or was, just like with Elliot Rodgers perhaps, but just like with the Nashville shooter too, where, you know, the manifesto, I think, has now been released. I'm not really sure who can keep up with all of the manifestos that are out there. But is there any kind of common linkage between any of these people along their journey? I think that we need to be very careful in using that term because, again, we're not really getting to the heart of the matter here with Kohberger. It's going to bear a deep dive into his familial history, the impact that his raising. I've heard a couple of people say, well, he was impoverished. He grew up in really bad poverty. I'm thinking, There's a hell of a lot of people who've grown up. I grew up in partial poverty.
That's also not true, I don't think either.
Yeah, and so what does that even mean? You know, what is it that is in his guts? What is it that is in his DNA, literally and figuratively, that would drive him, you know, to do such a crime? And I think that's one of the things that always keeps people coming back to true crime, because they see how horrible these things are, and I think some people want to know, do I know anybody that's capable of doing this? Am I capable of doing this? What would be the motivator for someone wanting to snuff out these lives? I don't know.
When you're dealing with someone who's clearly, and I'm just using a broad term here, is way more complicated and probably worse than this, but clearly sociopathic in nature, it's like, how much can you even get to that snap point where you're like, oh, that's where it shifted. Now, it's easier when you can spot something where something horrible happened in someone's life and then talk about people who knew them and the behavior that changed. That, okay, those ones can tie together pretty well. But when it's more of a slow burn or something like that, or something that's developed over time, and there's some other factors in the personality around it that help drive you towards that type of end route, it gets really difficult to ever know the truth.
It does. And look, this person's often cited, but if you look at Dahmer, Dahmer goes back to, he allegedly committed his first homicide when he was a teenager, beat the kid to death, and then discarded his remains there in Ohio. They went back. And, of course, his dad had famously, and look, I guess on its surface, if you're a scientist, there's nothing wrong with this, but him and his dad would go out and they would find roadkill, and they'd take it back to the house and dissect the roadkill together and to study anatomy, these sorts of things. His dad's this brilliant scientist. And then how did Dahmer develop over the years? Well, we had said, earlier that Kohberger's a junkie. Well, Dahmer was an alcoholic, all right? But just because you're a junkie or an alcoholic doesn't mean that you're going to go into a house off campus at the University of Idaho and completely devastate these kids and their families.
Exactly.
That's not an indicator of anything at that point in time. I don't know that we'll ever know the full depth and breadth of it.
I think about that a lot because I'm not a father at this point in my life, but I plan to be, and it's like there are so many. When the younger a kid is, the more malleable they are. And I'm not just talking about how you are around them. I'm talking about any environment they're in. And it's scary to think about all the different things in this world now that the smallest little, snap of the finger, wrong thing that they see could, get their pathway diverted off to something you don't want. And you think about, for example, the one you just mentioned, where it's like, okay, you have a scientific father who's genuinely interested in something, probably for the right reasons, I'm assuming, and happens to drag his kid along to look at this. Oh, let's dissect roadkill, but you don't realize psychologically
what it might be doing.
Yeah, and he's not able to handle. I don't know how old the kid was, but let's say he's 6. He's not able to handle yet the difference between doing that on dead roadkill or a human being.
Yeah, but then I think about generationally too, Julian. I think about, let's just take the Dahmer example with the roadkill. Children for generations and generations have been around butchered animals. What is it about modern times that has driven people to such levels of violence like this? And I know that violence has always been around, okay, but we've never seen it kind of like in the form that it's currently in. I think a lot of the driver, and it's really easy, again, I'm being dismissive by saying this, I think a lot of the driver behind it now is probably social media. I truly believe that. I think that people are exposed to things that they weren't previously exposed to. And if we go with the idea that they're psychologically fragile in any way, what's to say that something couldn't push them over the edge?
For sure.
And that's why they make such a big deal out of cyberbullying and all these sorts of things, because it can perhaps push somebody to do something terrible to someone or to themselves. You never know.
I think you're 100% right. I think we've seen trends and commonality of horrible trends become way worse with social media and the impact that a kid can have clicking something halfway around the world that is going to change their perspective on things for all the wrong reasons. You can't underestimate that at all. But I think there's also a middle era there that we shouldn't ignore about human nature, which is that even if you look at like the time of Bundy or like Dahmer, this is pre-internet era.
Oh yeah.
They didn't have social media and things like that. But why suddenly were there way more serial killers than had been known to be in the past? When you look at violent, way worse societies that go back 1,000 years, violence was done out of don't mishear me on this. Violence would come out of a form of survival necessity to a lot of people, including when it was completely wrong on every level. So at a high level where it's more normalized would be like war.
Right.
You know, a tribe's fighting against another tribe and they kill each other, and war's hell and it's ugly. On a lower civilizational level, if someone's starving and another dude is going for food and the two of them haven't eaten in 5 days because they're living in bumblefuck and one guy kills the other to eat, it's not right, but it's a survival mechanism. And so when I look at even before social media, this is just me theorizing with it, and you look at the rise of violence and these creative violence, I would describe it like...
I would describe it as now... I would describe it in the world that we're in, social media world, as recreational violence. That people, people, it's been normalized to the point where people think that it's acceptable behavior to do what they're doing. Even when you look at, folks that are threatened and bullied online, people that are doxxed, all these sorts of things that happen like that. We never in our wildest dreams would we have imagined, that people could be impacted the way they are impacted now by this new thing that's been injected into our system.
And the comfort of being behind a keyboard or even behind a camera, right? And not having to three-dimensionally communicate with people like this, I think, rewires your brain in such a negative way. I've seen it again and again with people that I say would never say something like that to my face or something. Some of those people can be driven to a point where maybe they would and wouldn't even realize they're doing it because they're so disassociated.
It seems like I remember Mike Tyson had quite a interesting quote about keyboard warriors and people that do that sort of thing. And keyboard warriors have driven certainly to a degree this case. Oh my God, the Karen Reed case out of the Boston area up there. That again, a case that's just absolutely bananas, where you had groups of people and it's divided along these lines, where people are, harassing each other and showing up at court with, posters and all these sorts of things.
Horrible.
Super bizarre behavior that I've never seen manifested before.
But to go back to that middle era, meaning after the times where you were fighting over food just to eat that day, but before the times of social media. So let's just keep it on a more micro level. Talk about the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, where you saw these quote-unquote recreational killers and things like that pop up, and violence in regular society shock people that an individual could stoop to such levels of evils. I think there's three factors, and they all go hand in hand, driving each other, feeding each other in a way. One, environment, which doesn't mean you have to grow up poor or something like that. Maybe your dad was abusive. Two, psychological wiring. Maybe you are more wired psychologically to have X, Y, or Z disorder that disassociates you from other people in potentially sick ways. And then three, time and comfort, which I'm combining as one. And what I mean by that is, in 1800, there's no electricity. You had to go out and you had to kill dinner.
Yeah.
You had to survive.
Yes.
There wasn't time to think. There wasn't time to wonder about, well, why does Mr. Jones down the street have a house that's 3,000 square feet and I have one that's 2,100? There wasn't time to bullshit at, around the water cooler at the office, at the job you hate but you go to because that's what you're supposed to do. And something about us moving from the wild of surviving that all other animals besides us on the earth have to do every day, where last I checked, there aren't a ton of serial killers across species. There's violence across species to survive, but it's not like we see a BTK of fucking even lions or whatever all the time. Maybe some of the environmentalists out there can correct me on that, but it's like, we have developed from having to fight for things out in the wild to live under fluorescent lights and think about things. And something about that, being in a room and having time to ourselves to think, can drive some people to go in all the wrong directions.
I think so. A lot of spare time, too much spare time maybe on our hands. Idle hands are the devil's workshop, they say. And it's something I live by. That's why I always try to stay busy. So, but yeah, I think so. And plus, you see what everybody else has, I think, now. And it to me, this, and listen, I think that when it's all said and done, social media is going to play a big role in this horror show out in Idaho. We can't fully appreciate it now, but as the layers are being peeled back from these cases, it's not a single case. These are cases because these are individuals. These are somebody's babies. As this is peeled back, we're going to understand the depth and breadth of it. You were talking about referencing the Papa Rogers thing. And, we've heard conversations about this for a protracted period of time. Was it him that was doing this? Was he teasing all the way along? One thing that really stands out in my mind, Julian, again, this was in the data dump that came out, I guess over a month ago now, is there's that picture of him standing in front of his bathtub.
Where he's thumbs upping?
Yeah, and his hair is, and when you take a look at it, maybe it's just me, I don't know, but when you take a look at it, his hair is combed over and parted on one side, and it looks wet. Almost like I've shed my skin. I've shed those things that I was wearing. Now I'm standing here with my fancy smancy little shirt on. It's buttoned all the way up to the collar. I'm pleased with myself. I'm getting a thumbs up. I'm showered and I'm ready to hit the road again.
Yeah.
And, I look at it and he is such a freaking reptile.
Yeah, exactly.
When you see that. And that's in the wake of what has just happened, just so that we understand that. As a matter of fact, I think that when that image was taken, if I'm not mistaken, the bodies had yet to be discovered. So that gives you an idea.
It's totally fresh.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost like, I don't know. I mean, tell me what you think. You see it, he's there in front of the shower, like he's very happy about it. Hair's all slicked down, and it's not like you normally see him. And boy, he's white as a ghost, isn't he? White as a ghost.
It's easy to say on anything, hindsight 2020. How could you not have seen? But that was, you remember the first picture they released of him in the bulletproof vest from the jail. If we can pull that up, Joe. I remember seeing that like the night he was, or I don't know, the day after he was apprehended. Whenever I first saw it, like within 24 hours of him being caught. And you look at this and you look into his eyes. There are no lights on. There's no one home. That is like, I'm not one of these people that believes in like demons and demonic and stuff like that. Like people throw those terms around a lot online. I mean, who the hell knows? Maybe it is real. I'm open to it, but I've never been one to really subscribe to that. But I remember seeing that for the first time and going, he doesn't look human. Yeah,
he's got, I think that, one of the things that psychologists do is when they interview people, they're also looking for body language and that sort of thing too. And I'd be interested to know how he could vocalize things, because I'd want to know if he has what they refer to as a flat affect. Where it's just very monotone.
Oh, I'll bet he does.
Piercing looking.
Yep.
And he's got this reputation as well. It's like he's the smartest. He thinks he is the smartest person in the room.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons he didn't get along, certainly with the people out in Washington. Now, what's gonna and I hope that this comes out. I'm going to be very curious to see what his relationship was like with the people at DeSales, particularly at the graduate level. What his interaction as he's kind of evolving as a student. Was he building up to this crescendo where it's like, okay, well, I've learned all I can possibly learn from you people. Now I am the smartest person in the world, and I'm going to go out and make my name out in Washington State.
James Patterson had one of his guys that he went to school with at DeSales on their interview, and he had a lot of interesting tidbits. Among them were he worked on group projects with him, and one thing is he said he was a great person to work on group projects with. He was really smart, very nice, a little different, a little distant, but meaning when the kid was talking about it, he was making it clear he didn't have those red alarms, hindsight 2020, I just mentioned, going off in his head, which was interesting to me because then he went on to explain, among other things, that, you know, he would invite Brian out socially, you know, to hang with the boys. And he said he would never take the invite, ever. And, you know, this guy just figured he's a loner. He doesn't really, he isn't really around people. But it's not like, you know, no, not every loner is a serial killer.
No, they're not.
Or a mass murderer or something like that. But when you think about it now, it's interesting that he would have been described as like a good, you know, partner on a group project, like, meaning this kid was implying that he had some interpersonal skills. Obviously, he was a little behind the eight ball, but he wasn't dead to the world, just looking at you like, just give me the answers, man. There was nothing in this kid's experience that would point that out. And by extension, it seemed like, and I don't know this for sure, he was insinuating the other people who worked with him as well didn't seem to have that inkling either.
Well, maybe he's the one kid on the group project that would take charge and do everything for everybody else.
That could be it,
you know,
too.
He's toting the water for everybody else because he thinks that he is the smartest guy.
And in control when he does
and in
that.
control of it,
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, if you take somebody like that, if you continue this idea, you take somebody like that and you put them into a PhD program where it's very rigorous, you are completely out of control. As a matter of fact, you're under somebody's thumb for a protracted period of time.
Yes.
They're going to really cut you loose for probably about 2 years, more than likely, particularly when you start your research work, working on that dissertation, trying to drive toward that. And maybe he thought that he already knew everything when he showed up, and he didn't.
Well, it is like all these cases are, a sickening one. And, you know, it's very difficult for people with a beating heart, no matter how much expertise they have, to cover it, especially as long as it's been. But it's very important when a guy like you does answer all the questions on this stuff, as you've done beautifully today. But
Well, thank you.
You know, also you've been doing this intermittently with all different details and news that would come out over the past 3 years, and it's like, it's important because I always say it like this. Unfortunately, you can't eliminate all evil in the world. That is the nature of humanity and this little spinning rock we live on. But if there's ways that, you know, small little ripples can lower the percentages over time, which statistically, by the way, we have seen that happen.
Yeah.
You know, it can help. And maybe there's one less of these.
And I hope
forward.
so. I would hate to think that. And again, I'm very, very cynical that we're not going to see this happen again. I think that we will. It'll just be in a different mask because it's never going to stop. People that think that it is are off their rocker, because evil has always been with us. It will continue to be with us, and I've been documenting it my entire adult life. I see what's left behind in the wake. And, you know, Kohberger is, at this moment in time, he's in the news, but there will be somebody that will replace him. I can guarantee that will live on in infamy. But hopefully we will have learned something. I don't know what yet, because it's all so freaking tragic along the way.
It's, it always, it leaves changed lives, as we've said a million times today, in its wake. And I hope people don't lose sight of that. And again, that's why I appreciate how you handle this stuff. And it was clear that even the mother of Ethan Chapin appreciated that about you.
God bless her.
So,
I hope that she finds peace.
By the way, of all these families are incredibly strong to be able to deal with this and even talk about it. I can't fathom that. But that woman was...
if that had been...
Whoa.
If that had been me, I would still have been. This is only 6 months after the fact, I think.
Something like that.
Some approximation. I would have been curled in a fetal position in the corner. There's no way I would have been upright and doing what she did. I couldn't take the measure of it at that moment in time. That was a room of 3,000 people when I was standing up there. And I just literally described what I believed at that time had occurred at the scene, and what from an evidentiary standpoint, the things that they would be looking for and all that, because people just really didn't know. We didn't have any information. And of course, I brought a K-bar along with me. And then, you sit there, and then the mom steps up.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, oh, my Lord in heaven, I've just talked about this in front of her.
Hope I did a good enough job.
Yeah.
Like,
and I hope I was respectful.
Yeah. Well, you were. And I do have to say about her, what a strong lady. Of everyone in that James Patterson one on Amazon, man, she really just blew me away. I mean, obviously, she's a mom who lost her kid. She's gonna be in pain the rest of her life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying she's over it at all.
I don't know if people realize that Ethan's a triplet.
Yeah, exactly.
He's one of three.
Yes, and so they're tied to they had the siblings in there too, and they're incredibly strong as well. But I could only imagine the hatred in my heart that I would have in that kind of position. And I don't think she has that. And I admire her for that.
Again, what she has stated that her and her husband are going to be doing on the 23rd is they're not going to be at the court.
That's right.
They're going out on their boat, which, good on them. I'm happy for them, because that's where they will find peace. I think and there's several images out there of Ethan and Xana together on a boat. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's probably an appropriate way and far be it from me to tell them how to celebrate anything. I'm nobody compared to what they've gone through, but what a great way to, kind of celebrate his life and put this beast in the deepest, darkest hole that we possibly can, and let us speak of him no more. And because I don't know that he has any value whatsoever to add to the conversation any further than after the 23rd. I hope that we're done with him forever and ever. Amen.
I hope so too, and I hope that whatever studying happens on him, happens with the professionals behind closed doors with no cameras, so that he doesn't get any attention and doesn't get all the things that
and I think he'll be craving that. I certainly do.
Of course. But we do have to talk about the guy who never dies, apparently.
Oh my gosh.
Jeffrey Epstein. I have obsessively studied this case.
Really?
For 6 years.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Gotta say it. And like everyone else out there, I run into the same unanswered questions that many of us have. But something about the past couple weeks has made me particularly sick, just at how much, especially for this administration, what a left turn it's taken with just like veering off the road into Trump's literally like, this is a boring, he said things like, this is a boring case, I don't know why anyone cares. It was invented by Obama, which is the funniest thing I think not funny, the stupidest thing that he's said, and that's really saying something. Jeffrey Epstein was seen around a lot of people, and unfortunately he was quite good at it. Eventually he did himself in because he got a little bit of fame, and I guess fell victim to the same thing a lot of people fall victim to. He liked it and felt like he was invincible. And luckily, some great detectives in Florida were able to catch him. And then he got this crazy sweetheart deal, but, eventually gets taken down. The problem is that we never get to hear from him because, of course, he dies mysteriously in prison. But you're talking about a guy who ran into circles just to say he ran into circles, which means that there are plenty of people that he just took a picture with one time who didn't even know him, but just happened to be at the same place, who will have to answer for that for the rest of their life. And those people, of which we're not even sure who's who, I empathize with that. That's a bad place to be. But then there's people, powerful people, cross-culture, industry, whatever, who he was friends with and who did spend time with him. And you know what? Some of them, they might have not been spending time with 25-year-old models either, dare I say. They might have been full-blown like him. And I don't need to paint that picture. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. But it has been particularly galling to see the complete denial of Trump and I guess the people around him who might be being told what to do. So I don't even know what to think of that. That's happened. And, we've seen the twist of the knife happen even more when the one thing they are claiming to be transparent about after telling us these files don't exist, which is total bullshit, is they're like, well, here's the video we were telling you about of Epstein in prison. And yeah, this is proof he killed himself. Where you don't see anything. You see a guy on a grainy screen walk back off camera somewhere into the prison. And, oh, by the way, the DNA of, the technological world, which is metadata, Joe Deep's term, not mine. I mean, that's brilliantly put. So let's give you some credit
Joe.
there. As if we're not going to figure out, the public's not going to figure out on publicly available video as you made it, that there's 3 minutes missing. It's just galling.
Yeah.
And you have looked at this case for a long time from the perspective of your expertise, which is, as I said, you have a guy that the government alleges killed himself in a jail cell.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the evidence that you found, the images that Joseph showed me off camera, I'm not going to show on video because then this video will get demonetized. But you can find it online if you type in some of it. At least you can type in 60 minutes. Epstein,
and it's all
autopsy.
everything I've seen is actually, and this is from several years ago. There are multiple screenshots that are out there of what of this information that 60 Minutes had come into years ago. And then you couple that with what Dr. Bodden said, because he was present, at the examination, the postmortem examination, at the behest, by the way, of the family. He was there representing the family.
The Epstein family.
Yeah, and the Epstein family, his brother in particular, who he drew, his own independent conclusions relative to what he was seeing before his eyes. He did not arrive at the same conclusions that the chief medical examiner, Dr. Sampson, I think is her name, for the OCME in New York came to. And I got to tell you, if I'm listing in any direction, it would have to be toward Dr. Bodden. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. When you begin to think about the method in which that he utilized in order to take his own life. I think the biggest question I have, because I've worked cases inside of jails before. Okay, I mean, it happens. You go in there; it's a horrible environment to have to work a case in, and that's only provided that the body is still there. Okay, many times if they get to the body or the person soon enough, they'll roll them out, they'll run a code on them and take them to the local hospital. They did that in Epstein's case, though he was obviously dead at the time they removed him from that cell. He's cyanotic, he's cold to touch. I don't think that there was much there to save. But because, again, here's that word, contextualizing, because the body is out of the cell by the time the OCME investigators get there and take pictures of it. All they're left with is this human pigsty of a place that he was living in. I got to tell you, one of the things that shocked me, even more so than probably what Bodden had said in the injuries, I couldn't get over how filthy this place was. And I'm by far not the most fastidious person, all right? I don't make my bed every morning. I'm just not one of those people. But when you see the cell, it looked like a tornado had gone through there. There are ripped up bits of cloth, sheets, clothing. There's pill bottles displayed up on the empty top rack where there's no, it's a bunk bed, and then there's no mattress up there, but there are pill bottles up there. There's a CPAP machine in the cell itself. It's just filthy and disordered. I mean, really dirty. You always have this vision, I think, almost like Shawshank maybe, that if they come by to check the cell, things are going to be ordered because, the order in a physical environment is kind of indicative of what's going on inside your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is any indication, this guy looked like he was living like a madman. I mean, everything was ripped to shreds in there. And no, I don't believe that this was like an effort on the part of the team that came in to try to resuscitate him. They did get him intubated, which means they put a tube down his throat. I saw that image from the hospital. But one of the most striking things is that he has got a ligature mark, or what appears to be a ligature mark on his neck. And if you look at it closely, it almost looks like it's been potentially readjusted a couple of times.
Readjusted?
Yeah, they're kind of overlapping. It looks like two separate marks on one level. It's dried, abraded, which is what you might expect to see with a ligature, where it rubs down to that layer of skin so that it's not like a scab, but you can tell that the top layer of the epidermis has been affected so that the dermis itself is beginning to dry out. It's got a yellowed appearance to it, kind of red, a bit inflamed. He's cyanotic, which means from the mark of the ligature up, he looks like an eggplant. He's purple, okay, which is oxygen deprivation, which you can get either with hanging or you can get with manual strangulation. The problem with his case is that this ligature mark that he has, and I plead with everybody, please go look at this image. You don't have to believe me, call me a liar, I don't care, is inferior to his hyoid bone. Now, hyoid bone is the key here. The hyoid exists way up in your neck. If you'll find your Adam's apple right here, and you go superior to it about an inch, your hyoid sits right about here. It's some people will say it's pathologists say it's a bird-like structure. It looks like a horseshoe to me. It's got two greater horns and two lesser horns. It's the only non-articulating bone in the human body. That means it doesn't communicate with any other bony structure in the body. The sole purpose of the hyoid is to anchor the tongue in the back of the throat. That's why it's there. Well, the right greater horn of Epstein's hyoid is snapped. It's fractured. You don't commonly see that in hangings.
Commonly.
Right.
You don't commonly see that.
No, you do not. You see that in manual strangulations, okay? Because you have to go so high up like this in order to facilitate it. You would, there's a couple of different strangulations, okay? I'm just going to give you a brief, sorry.
Don't follow these directions out there, people.
Don't.
This is educational, not inspirational.
Yeah, and I'm talking about from a homicidal standpoint, so there you go. I've qualified it even further.
Actually, Joseph, can we just switch out Joe's computer real fast?
Absolutely.
And then we'll do this full
Can
explanation.
I go to the restroom real quick?
Absolutely. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. What was that? You were just about to take us through the multiple forms of strangulation, I think it was, right?
Yeah, and so when I'm right now, as I'm talking to you, everybody's made a big deal out of Epstein, and this is something other than a suicide, all right? And you take the idea that the fractured hyoid, again, I reference this thing is way, way up in the neck. It's not something that you commonly see with a hanging. As a matter of fact, before I tell you about the two forms I'm going to talk about, do you know the only time I have ever seen a non-hanging, or let me rephrase that, start over, strike that. The only time I have ever seen a fractured hyoid as a result of something other than a manual strangulation, I had a guy that went over an off-ramp on I-10 in New Orleans in like a 1967, 68 Pontiac that had the gigantic steering wheel. He was not belted. He went over 3 stories, dropped, and his throat hit the steering wheel at the 12 o'clock position right here, and it fractured his hyoid. Every other one I've ever seen has been as a result of a manual strangulation. And it's one of the things that it's one of the first things that we look for at autopsy, because when you reflect the neck, and the way this happens, just so you understand, the tongue's coming out. So we cut through the bottom floor of the soft palate. And after we have the skin reflected, we trim this out and then pull down like this. The tongue comes out with the trachea. The esophagus is there. You get further down, you've got the aorta that branches off of the heart. But anyway, through this area, so we're going to look at everything. It's called en bloc, and we're going to look at this thing en bloc and take a look at it. And up in this region, one of the things that we'll see is if it is fractured, you'll see a little focal area of hemorrhage right here in the soft tissue. The other thing you're going to see are going to be what are referred to as strap muscle hemorrhages, these muscles that kind of lie over your neck. They're kind of banded like that. And you look for hemorrhage in there, and that's direct pressure that's being applied. So with that framework in place, with manual strangulation, most of the time you're either talking about a C-clamp, which is right here, okay, where you literally grab the larynx and you squeeze, okay? That has a real, as you can imagine, cartilaginous bodies in here. You've got this crushing effect that takes place. And you're not just compromising the airway, you're actually crushing the larynx at the same time. The other thing that we see are called throttlings. Throttlings are classic like movie. Like you see this, you can either do it anteriorly where you're coming at the individuals like this, or like some creepy 1930s monster movie, they come up from behind and squeeze like that. That way you get really high up on the neck. Nooses, most of the time, are very low when an individual is supported like this. And the primary weight of the body is supported in this one focal area, where it kind of dips down and the individual hangs there. And you can have either suspended hangings, partially suspended hangings. And suspended hanging is specifically what it says. A person is tied off. You have a hard point. The ligature is tied off. Noose is put on the neck. And the individual will be suspended, hanging in the air, like this. And they'll asphyxiate that way. You can actually have people that will sit down on the floor. And I've had many of these that will sit down on the floor with a ligature around their neck. They don't make any effort to get it off their neck. They have tremendous will in order to follow through with this. It does happen.
Isn't that how Robin Williams did it?
Yeah, his was attached to a doorknob. By the way, probably arguably one of the most well-written medical legal death reports you'll ever read in your life.
Robin Williams.
Oh, yeah. Go to autopsies.org, I think is the name of it. Very well written. The investigator did it is a textbook example of how you should write a report. And I know this horribly gruesome and that sort of thing. And I love Robin Williams, but I'm just saying, clinically, if you want to know how it should be done, that's how it should be done.
The detail you're saying.
Yeah. It's fascinating. And then you've got, autoerotic cases out there. I'm thinking about the carotene guy. Some people have said Michael Hutchins from InXS, over the course of a period of time. Either way, those were asphyxial deaths. And there's a lot of them over a period of time with hangings and this sort of thing. But then you have this group where it's required, they're not using their hands, they're using a ligature. And ligature can be made out of anything. A belt, a bit of clothing, a sheet, obviously a rope. There's any number of things. And these are items, an electrical cord. These are items that are found in everyone's home. Not everybody has a gun, all right?
Right.
So,
thought this was America.
Yeah, no kidding.
Got guns.
Yeah, well, in my little slice of the world, when I used to work suicides, the second leading cause was going to be hanging. right behind guns. Guns
Yeah.
are convenient, and they're obviously lethal, but hanging was right there. We work a lot of these cases. So with that said, Bodden has seen hundreds, if not thousands, of ligature strangulation cases over the course of his career. He is preeminent in this. He's worked a lot of jailhouse deaths. That's why, a lot of his points that he made about the Epstein case, I got to tell you, Julian, I believe them. I believe them because it's the evidence is there that this could be something other than as advertised.
Why do you, this was the question on the tip of my tongue. Why do you think Sampson, the New York Examiner with Bodden right there, who came to a different conclusion, why do you think she came to the conclusion that he killed himself when you had the hyoid bone fracture?
I have no idea. And she made a statement that it is possible to see fractured hyoids in suicidal hangings as well as homicidal strangulations, that you can, but you do not see them, in my experience at least, and I guess in Dr. Bodden's experience, you don't see them to the same degree. It's an outlier. Okay, if you're talking about fractured hyoids and hanging, it's just not something that you see every single day. All right, that's what's so amazing about this. Now, her staff went to the scene, but the body was not there at the scene. Remember, the guard claimed that he went into the cell and found Epstein with, I think, said that he was hanging by the ligature and he cut it. There were 2 nooses that had been tied in there. Neither one of them showed evidence of tool marks. Neither one of them had been cut. Okay, so you have to be able to explain that. And here's another thing: if their supposition is that he tied off onto the top bunk, which everybody knows what a bunk bed looks like. These are no different. They're metal, but they're not like it's not like it's a story high. If he tied off, let's say, on the top bunk and flung himself off of this thing with a ligature that's fashioned out of this orange cloth that the clothing is made out of and that sort of thing, he could not have had sufficient force, could not have been generated for him to have dropped that short a distance and achieved this kind of fracture that high up, particularly with ligature marks.
It's not possible?
No, I don't think so. Not so inferior to the location of the fracture. That's what has got everybody in my world that I kind of talk to. That's what has got people kind of jacked up about this and saying that this is the kind of thing that if you got 10 of them in your career, you would write a paper about and say, wow, yeah, I had suicidal hanging and fractured hyoids. Yeah, let's look over my 25-year career and see how many we've had. And everybody's sitting in a conference somewhere in a dark conference room with a thing lighted up on the board, and everybody's going, wow, this is something that would generate conversation.
Now, is it possible? You said the hyoid bone is used to hold the tongue in place, right?
Yeah.
So if, let's say I was alive and I fractured my hyoid bone, I'd be talking weird, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you definitely would be. And it'd be incredibly painful.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to strike the question I had because medically, I'm just not sure. I'm not familiar with it. What I was going to ask had to do with they claimed he had tried to commit suicide before, and I'm like, well, maybe if he had tried to commit suicide, he bruised it badly or something, so it could have easily, but that wouldn't make sense because he would have been in significant pain and talking.
Well, I've had other people that have made comments about how brittle were his bones at the age that he was at. Okay, could this thing have not required as much pressure and still have fractured like this? I guess it's within the realm of possibility. But again, if you're talking about the ligature, which again, no one has been able to see because it was quote unquote cut away. So they didn't go into the emergency room and this thing is in place. All right. As a matter of fact, one of the 60-minute images, when you see it, it's a picture of him lying in a supine position on a gurney in the emergency room, and he's got a C-collar on, and he's intubated. That's what you see there. And he's wearing, what we used to call a Johnny coat, which is the hospital gown, open in the back. It just doesn't sit right. It doesn't feel right. It would be certainly academically, it's an interesting finding if that's what you're claiming that it is. There are a couple other things relative to him as well. He's got a rather pronounced contusion also at the base of his neck, kind of where the base of your neck and your shoulder converge right here. And since we I don't know. I'm really curious as to what kind of age the pathologist put on this contusion at the base of his neck, and maybe is it a contusion that is resolving, like just like when we get a bruise at some point in time, you see how it goes through different color phases. It goes from red to kind of blue, purplish, then it gets into that kind of green and then a disgusting yellow color and that's one of the things that we use, for instance, when we're working on child abuse cases, because you'll have that fatal event with a child abuse case, and one of the things you go back is you age contusions. For instance, if it's ongoing child abuse, so you can see a kid that has like overlying injuries. They've got one bruise that's yellow, one that's green, maybe one that's purple. You know that bruising and this abuse has been widespread, and it's involving multiple surfaces of the body, and so you age those bruises.
Everything I've heard from, whether it be guys like you taking us through the scientific elements of it, or guys who have looked at the case extensively and have investigated other cases in the past that, have other patterns that could be parallel or similar to this. It just seems like I don't want to just jump to like the wildest, most fun theory. No. It seems like this is exactly what we're all looking at. A guy was killed and they're telling us he wasn't, and thank you, have a great day.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't see how I don't see how you can look at this and not at least question these injuries and the scenario that we're being given. And also, I think again back to my old fallback position as a death investigation, as a death investigator, is the idea of the postmortem changes. How long had he actually been down? Body temperature, all these sorts of things. Degree of fixation of postmortem lividity, distribution of lividity patterns. And that's stuff that has to be, it's best assessed at the scene. I guess you could assess it at the emergency room. You can't assess it at the morgue, because by the time a body makes it to the morgue and is laying on a tray, again, all of that data is shot. It's pretty much worthless at that point in time.
Have you, and if this is like off record and you can't share it, no problem, but you have a personal relationship with Dr. Bod and you've known him for years now. Has he given you like exasperated thoughts about just beyond his actual scientific findings, just like this guy, somebody killed him and they're covering it up? Like, has he said something directly like that to you, implying like there's forces at play here that are just above all of our pay grades?
For this purpose, I have not made any kind of attempt to communicate with him about Epstein at all. I've based everything, all of the conclusions I've drawn, based upon the photographic record, what he has said and then what Sampson has said. And I've probably seen Dr. Bodden probably 3 times in social settings, and that's at CrimeCon. 3 separate times since he did this examination, I would imagine. It's hard to remember. And I would never ask him about this because, first off, he's representing Epstein's family.
Right.
And it's really none of my damn business. But if I ever had an opportunity, maybe someday, I would love to have that conversation with him and really dig into this. Because, Bodden's he's got a brilliant mind, the way he views the world. And he has seen so much.
Everything.
Yeah.
JFK, MLK, George Floyd, Jeffrey Epstein, RFK.
Yeah.
Like, he did all these.
Yeah, he has. And he's consulted on so many things, and me, I'm a big fan of Cyril Wecht, too. And God rest his soul, Dr. Wecht is gone on now. But, I felt the same way, having conversations with Dr. Wecht, particularly as it applied to JFK. Because how he felt about JFK. He was the first and maybe the only person that was ever allowed to give a lecture at the museum, at the book depository museum, that was contrary to what the standard narrative is. And that was a groundbreaking moment, and he put forth his theories about it at that point in time. So, yeah, it's not for the as far as forensic pathologists are concerned, it's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a lot of intestinal fortitude and be very brave to put these things forward. But as long as you stick with the science, I think that's very important.
That's the key.
It is the key.
Are you following? And I look, forget even just science. When you're dealing with any level of facts, I do my best with that too. I'm sure I fall short sometimes, but I try to deal with what's the most juicy outcome, and let's turn it there. I try to deal with, well, what do we know here?
Yeah.
And sometimes it does line up with, well, that is the juicy outcome because that looks fucking crazy what's happening. But you have to try to have that discipline to let the evidence guide you.
You have to. I think probably the most disappointing thing about this entire case is that, and isn't this fascinating, Julian? The fact that this death took place in arguably one of the most controlled environments in New York. When you think about, think about this guy's incarcerated in a federal facility. And, now we've gone from scientific to the circumstantial evidence that's there. And the circumstantial evidence is not there. That train left the station relative to these weird goings on with accountability, people sleeping on the job, cameras not working, all these sorts of things. It's like a perfect storm. And so at the end of the day, you've got Dr. Bodden and you've got Dr. Sampson. And of course, his opinion matters to me. It matters to a lot of other people, but the official opinion is that of the chief medical examiner for the city of New York.
Yeah. They get to have the official.
They do. They do.
And you don't know who said, "Hey, listen up, lady. This is what you're gonna find."
Well, maybe, I don't know.
Listen, a lot of people wanted that guy dead. But one other thing before I get you out of here, as always, this has been incredible today. But I would be remiss to not mention that since the last time you and I talked on camera, they did release some JFK files. And the last time you and I talked on camera, we did like 4.5 hours on. You brought your binder with you since you were 15 with all that shit. You were ready. It was like I was worried you had like cancer. This was like a last testament or something. You were laying it all out there. It was
Get
incredible.
Everybody together, surround the table.
Yeah, like, all right, I've left it there. But was there anything in there?
No, there was no great revelations. And I think that anybody that, and look, I'm kind of parroting what other people are saying. If there's anybody out there that thought that there was going to be, a big X marks the spot and this is who did this, it's just not there. The fact remains is that this was arguably, and I'm speaking now from my perspective as a medical legal death investigator and a forensic scientist, arguably the worst autopsy ever conducted in the history and with just total buffoonery involved in it. And the best evidence of that is, I think, and I know I touched on this before, is Tom Noguchi's response in L.A. When RFK died. He invited people, specifically forensic pathologists, to come and attend because this had happened. He knew what had happened with JFK. And not everybody agrees with what happened at the scene with RFK. There are documents that are, supposed to be released relative to that. But what Tom Noguchi did, who's one of my big heroes, he allowed, what's the old adage about pulling back the curtain and darkness and sunshine kind of purifies everything. He understood that, and that he knew that he had to have those people present for that, or it was going to turn into the same kind of deal as it had before with his brother, and he did not want that.
Well, cynically, I feel like any promises we get from anyone that says, we're going to give you the information about insert crazy thing that happened in history here.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen.
No, it's
Have
not.
we even gotten the Abraham Lincoln documents? I don't think so. I don't think so.
No.
I don't know what happened at the bottom of Ford Theater.
No, I don't either. I'm one of the cases I've been thinking about doing recently is probably going to be Garfield is next up because he.
Oh, I always forgot he got whacked.
Well, yeah, and he died as a result of dirty hands too. And it was the first time that a semblance of an X-ray machine was used. To locate the projectile, and you've got these guys with their filthy Peter beaters, digging into the defect in his.
You just call it a Peter beater.
A Peter beater, digging into this poor man's wounds, and of course he collapses. He's not long for this world, and you can say all you want to. They didn't understand that microbial world at that point in time, but. Good chance he may have survived. Don't know what his quality of life would have been like. But, yeah, I've always been fascinated by Garfield's death. And not to mention, Lincoln's son was there when Garfield was shot. Yeah. And he was also, I think he was also present for McKinley's as well.
All right.
Up in Buffalo.
That's enough. That's enough. We're going to be here all day. Fuck. I want the Lincoln files. JSM, you got body bags. We'll have the show link down below.
Thank you, brother.
It's the best podcast in the game for really anything in true crime. So can't recommend it enough to people, but it is always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
To talk with you, sir.
Yeah. Best to you, man. Thanks so much.
All right. Until next time. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.